Good evening and welcome to the April 4th, 2018 meeting of the Gaithersburg Planning Commission. First up is the approval of our minutes from March 7th. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of March 7th, 2018 as read to the record.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we have a recommendation to the Board of Appeals on BOA-7814-2018 special exceptions for a rooftop telecommunications facility at 430 Allied Place in the MXD mixed-use development zone. It looks like Caroline Seiden from staff is presenting. Good evening, Caroline.
Hi, good evening. This is a recommendation to the Board of Appeals for a special exception at 430 Allied Place, which is Hidden Creek, right on the corner here of North Summit and Girard, and this is Allied Place, and the subject building is apartment complex with parking garage, and the subject is on top of the parking garage. We are here before you in accordance with section 24163D of the zoning ordinance. Telecommunications facilities are permitted as a special exception in the MXD zone and require a recommendation to the Board of Appeals from the Planning Commission. I will just note we did not, as staff, make a recommendation ourselves. Typically, we would draft a resolution of approval for you to review, but because the applicant will go through the various iterations that we've been through, we wanted some feedback before we were ready to make that recommendation.
Okay.
So we have been working
Danny, any
probably
feedback?
since last summer on this plan, and have very much appreciated the number of times we've asked the applicant to go back and work on it. We don't typically, I think this may be the first residential building of this type that we've had a review of this kind for, so we just wanted to make sure that it was reviewed properly. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean Hughes, who is here from Miller and Canby on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Hughes, as was said, from Miller and Canby in Rockville, on behalf of the applicant T-Mobile. I'd like to give a quick overview, but also let you know we do have some other members of the T-Mobile team here. We have a civil engineer here. We have a radio frequency engineer here. We have the real estate agent and the zoning agent in case there are questions that you have or if I need assistance with kind of the overview.
Great. Thank you.
I also want to thank staff generally and Ms. Forbes, Ms. Seiden for their time and guidance they've given us so far. As she said, it has been since last summer, and we appreciate the time and efforts and also the staff report they've put together. So our goal, why we're here, is T-Mobile is trying to meet its customers' needs to enhance wireless connectivity in the city. And quite honestly, if they didn't have to build these new sites and the customers were happy and they could collect the same amount of rent each month, that would honestly be better for them. It's not something they can do. They're not keeping up with the pace. The wireless data usage is just amazing. Ever since the iPhone was introduced a little over 10 years ago, it has needed many more antenna locations in order to keep up with people using their phones or iPads and the speed and the 4 and 5G technology that's coming. So the reality is they have to keep building sites. They're trying to find creative solutions to meet the need and also to try to fit within jurisdictions like Gaithersburg, where we know, in particular, Gaithersburg's been a leader in trying to say, stay away from building new towers and monopoles in city limits. Find existing structures. There are a fair amount of structures in the city limits, and by and large, I think that has worked for both sides over the last 20 years. And so what they're doing here is this is an area that has had tremendous growth in this building itself, as you're going to see, is pretty new and has a lot of units, and then there's a lot of townhomes that have come up to the east of it, etc. So there are a lot of customers there. And if I could,
Just scroll.
okay. No.
Other way.
Okay,
There you go.
I'm going too fast. Sorry. Okay, so this is a.
I'd use the arrow buttons.
Oh.
I can use arrows also. There you go. Okay. So first thing to kind of set the table as I was talking about data uses. This is something that T-Mobile had shared actually last fall with the city when you guys were reviewing the telecom antenna ordinance areas. And so, I mean, the data usage, as we allude to, as I noted, is just incredible. This huge hockey stick increase. Years and years ago, we kept hearing that data is coming, but people are using their phones as phones. Nowadays, it really is a little computer. It's a mini computer. People are sending pictures. They're searching the internet. They're watching videos. I have teenagers. A lot of younger people watch TV and movies and sports on, and that requires more and more sites. You have to keep widening the road, essentially, to keep up with the traffic. And so this is stats that just shows Montgomery County that it's projected to increase by 2,900% since 2014. I mean, this is real challenges. And in this situation, we're trying to make this building there is 4 stories. We're trying to go on top of the parking garage, which puts it up close to 70 feet, and trying to find a solution that meets your zoning code and will provide the enhanced connectivity that will fill this coverage gap that the customers need and want and are demanding. So this is obviously an aerial looking down, and I apologize, I should have put a circle here, but we are, is there, okay, great. So it's a little hard to see, but let me make sure I got this right. Here's the parking garage. Down in this area here, there is a room. It's a stairwell room with like a penthouse. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong corner, over here. And what we're looking to do is put the antennas up here, but we need additional height. It's not just we want additional height, but a few reasons. This is the tallest building in this general area, but we also have some challenges that the radio frequencies engineers have to overcome in order to have the connectivity work well in this area. And so there's some real challenges. First of all, the buildings you'll see around here, these townhomes are pretty tall too, so you don't want to be blocked as soon as you come across here. There's also, it's not going to be able to see it here, and I didn't bring close-ups, but just on the other side of this wall, there's the building has a bunch of, I believe they're AC type units or similar fans that are just on the other side of this wall, and there's about 5 or 6 of them, and I've been up on the roof myself, and staff was kind enough to meet us out there. Those are really close to where we want to go, and so we need to have some clearance there, and there has to be some room for the building technicians to get up there. So what I'm trying to say is we need to be close to 10 feet above this structure, and that's where some of the challenges come in, and we're trying to be creative here. So again, this is just a little bit cleaner view that Caroline had showed at the beginning, and again, this is the area we're talking about trying to put the structure on top of. And as you can see, lots of newer homes in and around this area, lots of customers and potential customers, and we're trying to, people want to use their phones and their computers in their homes, in their basements for their personal needs, also for a lot of them do business on it, they take their work home, or they have businesses they run out of their homes, and also all the businesses that come and serve all the residents here, whether that's the cable company, the power company, a delivery person, all different folks want to have reliable coverage. So getting to our first design, which I'll move rather quickly through these. Just a picture of the building before and after. These are antennas that we knew probably were not going to meet the criteria here, but we were trying to get a starting point and figuring out how, then we were trying to go back to the drawing board with our engineers to figure out how creative can we be here. But this is a traditional pole type mount, which really is not going to, would not be really doable in this location. And then just another view of it further away. So we moved on quickly to the second design, which is where we were looking at trying to do some type of concealed type chimneys, where we could put a certain amount of antennas in each of these 3. And some of the concern was, well, they might look a little too tall or be a little too prominent. So this is one we'd still like to, potentially have on a table. This is something that maybe we could do at the location we're looking at now, which is on top of that penthouse type building. here's just another picture of it. You know, they could be brick, they could be painted. There's things that we can do to try to have them blend in. They can be, they can be different color, different textures. So then we moved on to a third design, which was try to just have it blend into what was there. And there was some concern, again, just about, well, does it blend or does it grab the eye? And here's another view of it. Now the nice thing about this is we're able to conceal everything behind it. All the antennas, all the equipment would be behind this RF friendly, radio frequency friendly material that would allow the signals to go through. Again, some of the challenges are, as you can see, are some of these tall 3 and 4 story townhomes that are nearby. So we want to be able to get to more than just the ones on that first street. So it needs to be a little bit above. There's another view of it from this angle. From the many other places around the area, it wouldn't be as visible. But we wanted to take this shot from here where you could see it, and it certainly would not be invisible. We concede that. All right, so then we came to our design that we brought forth today and with staff. And T-Mobile wanted to go the extra effort as far as trying to really have it blend in and look residential. There are some pluses with this, and there's also been some concerns raised about, you know, again, does it blend, does it do the job, or is there some combination that might work? So this is from one angle. Here's from a different angle, and a third location, and then the fourth from further away. So I won't go into too much detail. I tried to talk about really the need here is data, is capacity, offloading. I'll just talk briefly about the engineering maps, and then we certainly do have the radio frequency engineer, but just to give you an idea. So this is the location we're talking about, where it says WAN 625. The dark green is good. That's pretty much means in building, in your house, in your basement, you'll have reliable coverage. Other than when it goes down to lesser ones, it's not as reliable, it's not as fast. So if we I'll toggle back and forth, you'll see if we were to build this site here, you'll see it would make a significant difference to the people in and around the area. So we love it to be much larger. In order to get much larger spread, we have to go much taller. So that's the balance, and I've been doing this business for close to 20 years. The balance is, do you want tall structures, new structures, or do you want shorter structures? When you have shorter, or you go on lower buildings and such, you got to have more of them. And so there is a balance. We're trying to meet, you know, the guidance really from the telecom direction that the city has been giving for years and years. So here's where it is now, and this would make a big difference for those folks in and around the area. We have, I probably won't go into this unless you ask for it. I'll just quickly show, we do have the plans that you know, support some of the visuals we showed. Here's the top of the building. Here's more detailed, and here's the area where we'd be placing everything upon it and potentially concealed behind. Here's a visual from this angle. And it's showing everything here, but it would be behind something. You couldn't see it, as you saw from the photo mock-ups, the photo simulations. I should have said those. Those are photo simulations, obviously. They are, we didn't actually put the facility up there. They're mock-ups to show a reasonable depiction of what they would look like. And then it goes into a lot more detail.
So how many antenna are hidden behind or proposed for the top of this penthouse? And is it important that they're all ganged in one spot?
So I'll try to answer this and have my colleagues jump up if I'm steering you guys in the wrong direction. I believe we want to have 12 antennas, and I think now 4 sectors with 3 each. And they do not have to be all together. That actually is typically a little more challenging for us to have them all together. I think oftentimes they are spread out on a building to where the directions are trying to go to. The challenge with this, look, we're trying to make the best of a situation here. This building gives some positives in that it has the most height in that general area. It does have where we're going is a very strong roof because it is the parking lot. There are some other parts of the roof that are kind of, when I say, and I'm far from a civil engineer, I'm actually not very bright in that area, but there's other areas where it's just a traditional type roof with a wood roof. And that just does not have anywhere near the strength to put some of this equipment. So they thought they could make it work from a radio frequency standpoint, put it all together. And the biggest challenge especially is that one direction where they have to get over those AC type fans down below with a clearance. And
Yeah, the only reason I asked that
Yeah.
was that, one of the strategies was to conceal it in something that looked like a chimney or some kind of a little element on top of a building. And, logically, it would make sense to have those kind of dispersed because that would appear more realistic than just clustering a bunch of little
Right.
chimneys in one place.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not suggesting that's the kind of direction we've gone, but just, I'm curious, technically, if that was possible, even if you worked with the four corners of the parking garage. If you didn't just concentrate it all in one place, but you still take advantage of the structure.
Yeah, I think if from a structural standpoint, you're right. I guess if we looked at the parking garage, it might be feasible. There might be some challenges as far as how many parking spots they could potentially give up, or if we could find areas that are not.
Okay.
It's something we could look at a little more carefully. Yes.
How's the presentation? Are we time to ask questions? Or?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's enough for me talking.
Okay.
Welcome any questions.
Anybody have any more questions?
Yeah, my initial take on it was it looked like a guard's tower at Shawshank. I was just concerned about the symmetry of the building. It just seems to, it drew my eye right to it. So that was my concern. And had you investigated any shared facilities with other communications, organizations? I'm not going to name any others, but I'm just asking. I know that there are, in a lot of instances, like in the metro, there's shared facilities and that kind of thing. Had you looked at something like that?
Well, T-Mobile shares facilities whenever they can. Our main
Mhm.
goal is to co-locate on existing structures whenever possible.
Okay.
So we're on Asbury building nearby. We're on poles that are towers and poles that are nearby. If you're referring to small type cells, that's something that they can be done when you're just trying to add a little bit, when you already kind of have strong coverage and you have
Okay.
your background established. In this area, with all the growth that's happened in the last few years here, they need more of a macro site.
Okay. So how much coverage are we talking about?
Well, I'll give you a rough idea, and again, I'll have to engineer. When I first started working as an engineer close to 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
there weren't as many users. So then these sites can be a few miles
Mhm.
apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it also depended upon what bandwidth. So in the old days, and I'm dating myself,
Mhm.
Verizon and when Nextel used to exist, they used to be able to travel further. Their frequencies that they
Right.
had, the spectrum they had. T-Mobile has to have a little more sites than like a Verizon, just based upon their frequency and their capacity, their frequency. The other challenge is just, as I said, it used to be mostly where you're trying to have coverage so people can make calls. Making calls does not congest the road, so to speak. Now that people are using their phones as computers, it is congesting the road and making it wider and wider, so you're having to put more sites and you're having to widen the roads all the time. So it's hard to answer that exactly, but realistically in populated areas like this, and I grew up in Montgomery County, in areas like this, all around the district in suburban Maryland, these sites for T-Mobile and many other carriers can be every half mile, every 3/4 of a mile.
Okay. Now the graphic you showed, I think you were looking back. And out into like 2019 and 2020. So you think that this capacity will serve that? Because it looks like there's lots of growth, and I guess you have numbers on out through past beyond 2020. So do you anticipate there to be a need for more in the near future?
I think the short answer is yes.
Yeah,
But the reality is, we can't go where there are not structures.
yeah,
And so this is a structure we need. I'm hoping somehow we're gonna get to a yes with the city, because we need this building, because this is one that can work. There's other, there's townhomes across the street, we can't use those because they're single-family
right,
townhomes.
exactly,
There's apartments nearby that are 2.5 stories and their roofs, or they're old, they're not strong enough.
right,
We know that the city doesn't want us to bring forth a new monopole. There's also, I believe it's a middle school northeast, not northeast from here,
Yeah,
not too far away. The
right.
schools have not
Yeah.
been something that's been working
Right.
much in Montgomery County. So your fair question. Yes, we need more sites, but we can't put them where they cannot go realistically. We believe that this is one that we can make work. We need to find a way to make it work.
okay.
All right, any other questions? Trudy? Did you? Uh-huh. But I wanted to make sure we got the commissioner's questions in. Yeah. All right. Is there anyone in the audience that's here to comment or testify on this application? All right. Not seeing anyone. Why don't you go ahead and do the recap that we've got really no recommendation, right? So,
We have no
and maybe
recommendation.
just be clear about what we would need to do tonight, since it's a recommendation to the Board of Appeals, it's not an approval unto itself, so.
Correct. Well, depending on, how you all would like to proceed, you could either make a recommendation to, the current proposal is the last one that Mr. Hughes showed with the brick
Penthouse.
and the kind of little siding on the top. But if you wanted to revisit any of the other earlier proposals, some of which may not work anymore, they would have to tell you.
Fair enough.
We could look at those again. It became clear as we kept sending the applicant back to do more, and each time we saw one, some people liked one better, some people liked the
Okay.
earlier one better, and we did not want to keep sending them back to do more and more
Okay,
iterations
well, and
of
I think in
something.
fairness to other applicants in the room, I don't want to turn this into a work session tonight just on this particular application, so maybe I'll do a quick top-line poll of the commissioners, sort of a gut reaction, anybody can jump in on what directionally we want to try to do with this. Either no direction specifically and send them back for more options, or if there's something that looks closer than not, just weigh in if you would, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think your suggestion about possibility of four corners makes more sense as far as from a aesthetic view. I would defer and say, go back and let's continue working on it.
And I would agree with that. The balance and symmetry is the problem that I'm having with it. It just looks, it draws your eye right to it, and I think that would be the problem. It is not, it's just not we always try to look for things that are harmonious, and it just doesn't have that sense of harmony to me.
I think if you were to spread, it's really it's really, they're trying to push, east, right, east and north, the signal, so it's really gonna be that one facade. So if you did the chimneys, I think the chimneys were really based on that higher stair tower piece coming up
Could
in the
be.
garage.
Yeah.
So I think if you had a chimney that was off of that stair tower, I think it would be 20 feet tall. So I think it would, do you know what I mean? So to be at an equal height to get over top of the roof. So I think it would be an equally odd condition that you'd have a 20-foot tall
Could well be, yeah.
thing. And so, I mean, I don't have a great deal of heartburn of the oddity of the little pitched roof penthouse
Okay.
thing. It's odd.
It is
Clearly
odd.
But it's an interest. It's a yeah, it's just a strange little thing on the skyline, and at least it's architectural and not just a vertical element. So,
I guess it's
To
the
me,
twin in me.
Fair enough, okay.
but that's
I think if I can ask the applicant to go to page A2, I believe is what it's showing on your screen right now. There's two elements that are protrude over this, the overall skyline. On the east elevation, you see there's two elements that are the same height. I personally don't have a single issue with the towers looking like, the cells looking like cells and just being the towers that they're supposed to be. I think that they call less attention to themselves. I think they, excuse me, the chimneys call too much attention. Their verticality is uncomfortable. Their proportion is, it's off base. You know, I was looking at the Board of Compliance regulations, and, you know, one of the items, I think it's number 4, talks about the bulk, the proportion, the size. I think that we're trying to overcomplicate something that if we were to just leave it as this and tack them to those 2 elements to cover the catchment area that you need to cover, it would disappear in the background and will make it less of an eyesore that I think it's becoming now.
Yeah, I mean, at least you didn't come in with something, a lot of pine branches stuck to it, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your thoughts. Many of us had that same idea. However, the code has specific language. Do you want
Yeah,
to do that?
I tend to agree, if you're going to put an antenna up, you might as well look at like an antenna. However,
Yeah.
there is a part
Right.
of the MXD zone which specifically says that telecommunications facilities in
Must
residential
be-
MXD zones, which
it
is
must be-
questionable what
Mhm.
exactly that means,
Yeah.
must be enclosed in existing
Yes.
structures.
Yeah.
We have always taken the existing structures a little liberally because if you build it, then it's existing, then you put something in it, you know, it kind of was semantics, but the idea of it being required to be within an enclosed structure is the problem, because of the type of building it is.
Has there been any, I'm sorry, has anybody from the townhouses been represented, and have they come forth?
We have not heard from them.
But they are aware that this,
They've been sent,
Proposal.
their HOA has been sent
Okay.
notification and the property's been posted, but
So basically, we're bound by this requirement to put something on the roof that it calls
it is
more attention.
enclosed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, closed.
Is,
And we've been down this road.
There,
I would make a recommendation that we waive that requirement for that. I just
No.
don't think that there's.
Don't think
I
you
don't
can.
agree with that.
I don't think you
No, we
can.
can't.
You don't have the authority
Yeah,
to
we
do
don't have,
that.
we can't do that.
now, there may be, depending upon staff, there may be some ways to interpret how large this existing structure has to be in order to hide or conceal the antennas. One argument I have, I know it's not one that's a winning argument, but technically, we all talk about the antenna. That antenna really is just a shell hiding the electronics inside. I know that's an extreme, I'm not saying that technically works, but the question is, how big does the structure have to be that would conceal these? Maybe it could be something
Well,
smaller.
I think the spirit of this is that it's stealth, that there is no,
Right.
no recognition that there's an antenna on the building. Right, wrong, or, you know, whether you agree or not, that's in fact what's been, I think,
Yeah.
written into the code.
Right.
So we have to help solve for that, I think is what the
Yeah.
point of this is. And I think what you're hearing is that there might be a little bit of discomfort with the proportion and size of the enclosure, but maybe there's a solution lurking out there that's a little bit more compatible with the existing building and the proportions. And, you know, what would you find up on top of a building like this? Frankly, you'd find potentially a
HVAC.
screened penthouse. You might find something that's enclosed but isn't quite such a strong feature of the building, you know, maybe not so much a steeple and bell tower.
Let me just ask Caroline and Trudy and everyone else from the staff. I mean, did you all, you know, see if there were other jurisdictions that had similar conditions like this? I mean, this can't be that unique. I
You mean the zoning
No,
condition?
they had a
or-
condition like this, well, or had a,
Oh.
you know, a need for a big
There-
structure
well,
like this.
There are examples. I get emails all the time from
Okay.
the Stealth Company, which is involved in doing this, and their steeples, and there's a whole variety of, but
Okay.
they tend, I don't know if they're necessarily as obvious as this one's, but they do sometimes add height to a building. I don't have any to show, you know, with
Okay.
me, but they're out there.
Yeah, okay.
With,
Yeah,
Mr.
clock
Hughes,
tower,
with the
yeah. Fake clock?
array, the first array, you had, I know there were 2 locations. One was facing Goshen Road. The other one was facing Girard Street. I didn't know where the third array for that
I think that's the
plan
one that didn't
was.
work for you in the end.
I think, my memory's not good, I think Caroline reminded me that I think the third one was going potentially going on really a wood roof, and when we looked at that a little more thoroughly, we realized structurally it would just not work.
So I'm hearing a little bit of a consensus that we need to do a bit more work on an enclosure. Maybe if we had the latitude to just let it be what it is, which is an antenna, that could actually work, but we don't have that latitude, it doesn't sound like.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes,
Or do we?
that's right, no.
We wish we did.
No,
We do
no.
not have that latitude.
I'm looking at Frank, I'm looking at the city
I
attorney.
know, it is part of the zoning requirement, it's really not a matter of something we can waive.
Okay. You're looking for direction tonight, not a motion, right?
Well, eventually, if you, if you want to send them to do more work, I would suggest that we make a motion to defer it and have it come back.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get to a consensus tonight,
No.
and I think more work on it's necessary, but I wanna make sure the right direction's out there for them to work from.
Right.
So, any more comments on that?
I'll just be honest,
Go ahead.
I'd rather live with an antenna in the middle of the neighborhood than that
Right.
thing.
That's not an option, but.
Yeah, we actually have examples of that where they're painted out of, kind of a medium
Yeah.
tone, and they tend to disappear into the
I
into the
mean, we
sky.
live with the electrical lines going through our neighborhoods and fields. I mean, I just find it less offensive than something
Right.
pretending to be. I'm against the whole ornamentation of something that it's not necessary.
Although that's what we're stuck with, I think, is to direct.
Yeah, unfortunately, again, we can't waive the code requirements.
I agree, I understand.
So I think the applicant tonight is actually looking for the direction within the code requirements of how they can proceed.
Okay, so anything else, any other comments? I think we're gonna defer. Now's the time to ask, is there some direction you can use? Is there more you wanna hear?
No, we appreciate it. I think there's some good guidance tonight. We hear you, and we have some good notes, and we're gonna put our heads together and
Okay.
talk to staff a little bit more.
Okay. I think, and I'll paraphrase a little bit what some of our criteria is in looking at these things, but there's a recurring theme of compatibility. And whatever the thing is, it somehow has to work with, it has to give the impression it really belongs there, right? And I'm not really joking when I talk about the large poles, pine branches on it, because it's been done as a sort of guise of, camouflaging or disguising a monopole. Well, the reality is there's no tree that tall, right, that would look that way, so it's kind of silly, just draws attention to itself. This is kind of in that same realm, you
Right.
don't want to do something that really seems irrelevant to the rest of the architecture and then ultimately just draws more attention to it. So, but there are probably elements that are based on cupolas or chimneys or towers that, when shaped and proportioned right, they look like they belong there, they were part of that whole concept, and that would be a logical place to hide it. And I don't want to say this too specifically, but if it ended up 3 feet taller just to make the proportions work, or it ended up 3 feet wider to make the proportions, whatever that is, don't feel like you're designing right to that last inch that encloses the antenna. Make it right for the buildings that it's on.
There's also a parking requirement that they'll have to absorb if they run into that, so you have your challenge cut out.
Yeah.
I do have another question that might help provide them some guidance. When we were looking at the chimney version of this, it was around the time that we came to you with another telecommunications facility at Crown.
Yeah.
On top of a roof there, and they had some chimneys that the planning commission did not like, and we changed the material or the color of those to match the to match the cornice of the building more. So that was one of the things that I had brought to them, that brick was not particularly. I don't know in this particular situation whether you feel differently.
Those comments from that application, I think,
Yeah.
it might have been me too, is that the building that was, the brick chimney was sitting on, didn't have brick below it. And it was misaligned.
Right.
So it was like sitting on top of a window of a building that wasn't made out of brick and had a brick chimney on it. So it
Okay.
was in the wrong place and the wrong material. So I think once you change to material that was in the building itself, and it looked like an extension of the materials of the building, and I don't know if they shifted it or not, I can't quite remember, but just there's some tectonics up there, having a solid element sitting on a void. There's some architectural, nuance here that it's tough. It's difficult, and it may really require somebody to take out a pencil and really work this thing over who's, a little more used to the full facade design rather than the antenna design. I know specialists are great. I love specialists, but sometimes you need a generalist to look at your facade.
Can I ask another question? The technology constantly changes, as you well know. You said you've been in the profession almost 20 years. Is this technology, the antenna technology, evolving as well and as quickly as the 4G to 5G? And if so, maybe in 3 months, what you're asking for today becomes irrelevant.
I wish the answer was yes, but it's not. No, the antennas are really just the vehicle that sends the signal out. So they are needed in greater numbers, greater and greater numbers. We really, the challenge is just finding the place to put them, to finding the height to put them and try to conceal them. So, in years ago they were a little bit smaller. They're actually, remember a few years ago the phones were getting smaller, and then all of a sudden they became computers, and so they're larger. The antennas were getting a little smaller, but now because of 4 and 5G and so much more that can be done, they're actually getting a little bit bigger.
Because I believe we did hear from somebody saying that the technology, that the antennas were getting smaller, they're getting easier to place, and they can put them in more places now.
Well, you're
small
right.
cell.
My point was
Small
correct,
cell,
but
okay.
you're also, so there's two things. When this is, as I said earlier, this is a macro site. Really, it's trying to serve a larger area.
Right.
The antennas need to be close to what they've been over the years, maybe a little larger. You're right. So once you have an area pretty well covered and you need small, then you can put these small antennas in. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So I think we're heading towards a deferral. Do you have enough direction to do a little better job integrating the architectural solution for this? Is that
We
fair?
think so. We hope
Okay.
so.
I think
Caroline, you good?
So I would recommend you sit with the elevations with an architect, and I think some combination of a penthouse extension that changes its proportions a little bit, and some chimneys as well. If you can spread out the cells, the antennas, that's great. I think you might be able to sort of add a few elements to the elevation that doesn't make it look like there's one element that just sort of sticks out of the middle of the building. But, yeah.
Okay. All right, so I think we have a recommendation to defer. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission, that we, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report, recommend that the special exception BOA 7814-2018 be deferred pending further review.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye, sorry.
So we're at 401?
No.
410?
No. she
Five.
agrees.
But you're aye on the yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Aye, aye.
Aye, aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Yes, good luck.
That takes us to our first site plan of the evening. That's for SP-7789-2017. The Mega Mart Grocery at the 26,600 square foot grocery store at 7 Dallamar Street in the C2 General Commercial Zone. And this is for a concept site plan. Caroline, you're sticking around for this one?
I'm
All right.
I'm seated, I might as well stay. Good evening again. Staff is before you tonight to present the concept site plan SP 7789 2017. The subject property is located at 7 Dallamar Street, which is right here, right in front of the fairgrounds, the old Golden Bowl restaurant, and also the parking lot confronting on the other side of Dallamar Street. Frederick Avenue is right along here to the northeast. The applicant is requesting to construct a new 26,600 square foot grocery store on the site of the former Golden Bowl restaurant. A demolition permit for the existing Golden Bowl restaurant was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission in December, and the commission determined that the building does not meet the criteria for historic or architectural significance, and the demolition permit could be granted. The application comes before the Planning Commission for concept plan approval in accordance with Section 24-168. And here tonight to present the application is Jeff Fuller with DNC Architects, and I will turn it over. I'm sorry. Well, you can start off and you can introduce.
All right. As Carolyn indicated, my name is Jeff Fuller, DNC Architects at 201 East Diamond here in Gaithersburg. And with me tonight is Eric Valquez from Megamart.
Good evening, guys.
Andy Bradshaw from JBA. all three businesses are actually currently located here in the city of Gaithersburg. I'd like to start by letting Eric make a brief statement about Megamart, their nature, their clientele, their stores, their growth, and just give a quick overview.
Good.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening, guys, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric. I'm one of the co-owners of Megamart. We're so happy to be here in Gaithersburg City since 2007. Everything started back in 2099, pretty long time ago. And I also have two more partners. They're not here today, but we're really happy to be here, to be growing every time more. And there's a point that we do need more space, and thank God we found a place that maybe we can make it work better for the community.
Great.
As Eric indicated, they are a specialty grocer. Their primary market is the Hispanic community. They've been here. They are currently have 11 stores in the DC metropolitan area. They're expanding into Baltimore, to Frederick, and to other areas, but their growth has been very strong. One of the other things that I should point out that's somewhat unique about the way Megamart operates, they bought this building outright several years ago, so that's sitting with their money. So they'd really like to get this thing moving and get it going forward. It's been a while for us to come up with our efforts, but the staff has been working with us, and we're very happy with Carolyn's report and the staff's what they've put together to date. Just in terms of what our current status is, as Carolyn indicated, we did go and file for the demolition permit in order to be able to get in front of the Historic District Commission, and they did agree that we are not a historic structure. We did file for an NRI, and that's been approved. There's been no significant features identified on the site. We do have conceptual stormwater management approval. We did undertake a traffic report for the property, and it does indicate that no signal is warranted at the intersection of 355. It has not officially been submitted since it's at the concept level right now. And we're here tonight to talk about the conceptual approval. Just briefly talking sort of the history of this, when we first looked at this, we actually did try to see from a sustainability perspective, was there any way that we could take advantage of the existing Golden Bull structure and take advantage of that? We've basically found that that was infeasible. The existing structure was a steel frame structure, but it had wood infill. It had a long span barrel vault roof, and then tight spacing of the structure on the first floor. We did have structural engineers look at it, and they really indicated there was no feasible way of modifying it to work for what needed to be. We ended up with too much second story space that would not work for the retailing function, even if we looked at cutting a well into it. So we did start with that as a baseline. We also then, when we first started looking at the property, we actually looked at keeping the building more or less where the Golden Bull is, on sort of the northern end of the property, closer to 355. And after the initial submission to staff, there just seemed to be too many issues that we were fighting. We're fighting the grade because it's steeper at that point of the site. We were causing all of the patrons to drive past the store to get to a parking lot, past the store. And so we flip-flopped the building and pushed it to the south end of the property near the fairgrounds property. It worked much better that we could get the loading dock to actually work on the low side of the site. It worked that the front entrance to the store addressed where the building is. But what it did require from an environmental perspective, we couldn't get away with saying that a lot of the site was being left undisturbed. So we're ending up with basically a fully disturbed site. But I think both us and staff are very happy with where we've ended up. One of the things that we've been sort of working through on this property, there's a lot of existing conditions. The lot across the street doesn't exactly conform with normal standards for parking. And so we're working with some tighter standards. We also are showing, based on the city ordinance, to be slightly short on parking. But one of the things that's very unique in the way Megamart operates, again, based on the clientele, a large number of their clients are either a no-car or have one-car operations or families. And basically, they have a free ride home policy that anybody who comes to the store and spends money gets a free ride home. So they have a shuttle service. So they find there's a number of people who either walk to the store and then take the ride home, or there's a number of people who are dropped off when somebody goes off to work, they do their shopping, and then they get the free ride home. They have done statistics in their stores that they really find that there's somewhere about 35% of their clientele take advantage of that. So it's a significant reduction in the amount of parking that's actually required. So from our perspective, when you look at the numbers, we actually think that with the parking that we're providing, even though we're going to be asking for parking waivers as we go forward, that we actually have an excess amount of parking from what's actually required from the way they operate.
Let me clarify something on that. Caroline, when the parking is calculated, is there a separate line item for staff or employees, or is it all just lumped together as a
No,
square
well,
foot?
in this particular store, they counted a certain amount of square footage for grocery, and then a small amount on there's a second floor or partial second floor that will be counted at a lower rate because it's, according to our parking chart, it's, if you have a second floor that is inaccessible from outside, it's at a lower parking rate, but it's all counted, we don't account the employees
Okay.
separately.
All right.
Moving on with the project in particular, as we're looking at the exterior rendering, one of the things that Megamart has found is that their clientele is very price-based, and it's not just what they spend, but it's the appearance. It almost picks up on the old Toys R Us attitude that if it doesn't look inexpensive, they're afraid their clientele are not going to want to be there. And they bring that to the exterior as well as to the interior of their stores, and they feel that it's been one of the things that's helped keep them successful in terms of the way they do their business. Just quickly going through this. What do I do to shift in? Okay. So basically, here's the site plan. Again, actually, I want to go back to this one. Okay. With the aerial, you can see the current store, which is a leased facility, that is really too small for their current operation. It happens to be one of their larger operations. They feel that with some added space, they can continue to expand their business and serve the clientele. The way the building is sitting, as indicated, we've pushed it up to the street, so it addresses the street. We have the majority of the parking to the north, so people coming down from 355 would come into the parking lot. We are proposing to add some parallel parking on the street, just to provide some additional space. Dalmar was constructed as sort of a non-standard right-of-way width, and so there's extra space out there. So we've basically tried to take advantage of that. And since the way the curbs work coming off of 355, it gives us some natural protection. The parking lot across the street, in general, we're keeping it very close to what was there from the Golden Bull. We are restriping it, and we are putting in new site lighting. Copy of the technical site plan. Again, our loading is on the far end of the property. One of the things that we found today was sort of an incorrect assumption, but early on we were told by staff that the buses for the fair wanted to be able to turn around and exit, and so we actually we conscientiously kept our retaining walls and things back. We'll get to it in a second, but we found that's a false assumption. Floor plan for the store. Right now, we've not gotten into any part of the interior design of the store. Some basic elevations of the two faces. We do have a depressed loading dock that gives on-grade access into the building. It's about a 3-foot dock to the adjoining the fairgrounds. The property is a little bit unique. There's a public alley that runs between 20-foot wide public alley that runs between us and the fairgrounds. We're not taking advantage of that. We had at one time considered requesting a abandonment. These are our truck turning radiuses when we were trying to demonstrate how the bus could turn around and how our access into the site. But as I said, we'll get to that. We're happy with the staff report. We're happy in general with the 4 conditions that staff made. The first condition, however, as it relates to the agreement with the fairgrounds, staff forwarded to us last night or yesterday afternoon comments from 2 of the neighbors. One was from the fairgrounds and one was from Shaw & Company at the corner 355 in Dalmar. We actually met with the individuals from the fairgrounds this morning, and I think they'll probably speak to you a little bit after this. But their indication is that they had stopped using the bus turnaround 15 years ago, and they're not interested in entering any kind of an agreement on that. If it was necessary, we don't have a problem with it, but we're also fine without it. And we did actually recheck that our trucks can back in into the dock without going onto their property. The second agreement, as it relates to the submitting the traffic report to the state highway, again, we're fine with that. We were a little concerned with the wording implied that a warrant may be required or was indicated, but the study was very specific. It says that no warrant is indicated by the study for it, but we certainly will submit it to the city, to the state. As it relates to the signage on 355, I'm not sure, but the sign's not there. So we're okay with that sign, or that ordinance as well. And obviously, recording a new record plat, we have no problem with that. So I addressed sort of the comments that came through from the Montgomery County Fairgrounds, and I'm sure they will speak to that. And Shaw and Company indicated a concern as it related to parking. Their property is here at the corner of 355 and Dalmar, and their concern has to do with patrons of the new Mega Mart using or taking advantage of their parking. Personally, I do not believe that should be an issue. Most people, particularly people going to grocery stores, like to park as close to the door as possible. If our store is located at the south end of the property and our parking lot is in front of it, and our across the street parking lot is in front of them, I think that there's hardly any reason that somebody would try to pull into their lot rather than ones that we have provided to us. But they can explain their concerns as to what was there. But we do have, as you said, we believe we have actually more parking that should be required. So at that point, again, want to thank yourselves for letting us make the presentation tonight, and thank staff for working with us over the past year, and here to answer any questions you might have.
Can you go back to your
Cut you off.
go back to your elevations and just do a quick rundown of what some of the assumptions are about color and materials? It's very bright in these renderings, but it could be it's just a diagrammatic perspective at this point. So
It is not completely refined at this point in time, but they are bright colors. If you look at the logo and you look at the colors that Mega Mart works with, we've tried to pull from those, but basically they are using primary colors in what they're doing. We need to go through and actually confirm the calculation on our signage sizes. We think we may be slightly over.
but what are those colors? What material? What is that really talking about? Is that a paint, an eaves, an awning, metal? What is?
Basically, the two red stripes are meant to be awnings. Our intention is at the close location here, we have to set back for a PUE, and because we're tight in terms of what happens on the site, one of the things we're going to be proposing is to try to put some of the cart corrals at that location. So we're proposing an awning that would come down around it, and then we'd have a low screen wall to keep it from being too visible. And so we've balanced that out with an awning on the two sides. The others are flush with the face of the building. Quite frankly, Mega Mart is relatively happy with the aesthetics of the store that they're in right now. So some of what comes from this is coming out of the center that they're currently in across the street, with then some brighter colors to try to lighten it up.
Is there a fence between the Golden Bull and the county property, the fairgrounds property right now? Can
There's
you
a
drive
fence.
down past there?
There's a fence around the fairgrounds. There's a chain link fence around the
Yeah, that's what I
fairgrounds, which
thought.
is on the far side of the easement, the right of way.
Right, so there's no access to the fairgrounds property?
Well, there
right?
is access.
I mean, I think you have to go down
There's
and
a gate,
around,
there's a
right?
gate.
It's a gate, so it's an opening? So.
When
you
it's
get through-
open,
Yeah,
it's-
when it's
yeah.
open.
There's a
Okay.
gate
Yeah,
and
but you can't drive through there, right? Yeah.
Somebody going to the fair cannot drive through there.
Yeah, okay.
Exhibitors can, and a large number of the trucks come in through there, so it is an important access point for the fairgrounds. And again, they sort of went through that with us this morning, but it is not a place that they're bringing buses in any longer.
Okay.
But this wouldn't change it. They retain the opportunity to do that if the need arises, and this doesn't really do anything to preclude that, right? This doesn't change the traffic flow down Delamar or anything like that. So.
Again, we have no issue with it. Mega Mart worked with the fairgrounds last year to allow some parking in the parking lots as it came forward. We had discussions again today in terms of during the fair week or the 9 days of the fair, trying to set up that potentially deliveries are done at off hours from when the fairgrounds are apt to be at their maximum capacities. Again, both sides want to work together. There's no bad neighbors or bad neighbors. Nobody wants that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Where are the shopping cart corrals in the parking lots? I don't see anything in your draft for that, number one. Number two, it's gonna require that people take the shopping carts across Delmar Street to get to the other parking lot. Is that?
That's
That's
correct. And I think before we're finished, we're going to have to add some additional cart corrals for picking up locations like that.
Okay. I'm just concerned about that.
Which usually takes a parking spot or two in the process, yeah.
That's the other thing, yeah.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? No? All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment? Jim, I know you mentioned a couple things to me earlier. So.
I'm James Clifford of the law firm of Clifford, Debelius, Boynton and Hyatt. I represent the Ag Center. The folks that are here for their application in the Mega Mart are doing a wonderful job of communicating with us. We expect a long, good relationship with them, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things we work out regarding timing and coordination, especially during the fair time, that we seem more than capable of doing with this particular team. They're a good group of people. A couple issues. One is page 7 of the staff report does mention a reciprocal easement that turns out is not necessary. They don't need it to turn their trucks into the loading dock, and we no longer need it for buses. That gate, it's really, if you think about it, I don't know if you know Delmar. Delmar just comes in dead ends at the fairgrounds, but there were 2 gates there at one time. 15 years ago, the buses would go in one gate, you turn around and come out the other gate. The gate on the right, looking at the fairgrounds, is still one that's operational and used, as well as a small pedestrian entrance there too. Those are kept locked for security reasons and are only open during fair events or during events that take place throughout the year. They do open and close over weekends and things when these events are taking place, but traditionally, because of the security, those things are locked up. And so it would not work very well to be open every morning for deliveries. So we've come to an agreement with them that won't be used, and that part of the staff report will have to be worked out with you all, so we won't be able to do it. Something came up at the last minute, and I apologize. I hope I'm not, a terrible thing to say, but we weren't aware that there was going to be on-street parking. On-street parking is a problem for the fairgrounds because of the truck traffic that goes in and out. During the fair, during the 9 days of the fair, all the vendors and the major trucks come in and out of Delmar, and they come back out. And the road is a little bit of a concern for us to be choked down by having cars on it. But it's not just during the fair. There are some events that we hold where that is the main entrance that people come and go. So we would be concerned about cars being parked there. Another just small piece of advice is you might want to suspend your we'll take you home for free during the fair. It could get very expensive for you. Okay, that's all we have.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to comment? All right. So on the parking, this is a city street, right? So
It is a city street.
The
so
city
it
can
would
make the
be-
call whether to allow.
Those parking spaces would not be counted toward their required parking or their parking. I mean,
Right, where I was headed was if during
was
certain
just-
events, they need to be blocked off or
Yeah.
no
It would
parking
be the
signs,
city.
but temporary no parking, the city could do
Right.
that
Right.
without
Correct.
a whole lot of issue, right? That would be a reasonable
Just like we did for the book
expectation.
festival.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so no other comments? So where do we go next? What is a recommendation?
Yeah, well,
or council-
as everybody mentioned, one of the conditions, they have agreed between themselves that they do not need anymore, which is fine with staff. That was really for the benefit of both of them, but if the buses don't need to turn around on the Mega Mart site, the only other issue was that the bus, or the truck turning exhibit showed the truck slightly on the fairgrounds property, but this is a concept plan, and it's close enough that I think everybody feels that they can achieve that turn without going onto the fairgrounds property. So we can take that condition out. And apparently the Golden Bull sign is gone, which we've been getting calls about, and somebody took care of it, and we don't know who, but we'll find out.
Big base.
It's a mystery.
Be a great souvenir for somebody.
Remove the sign, ma'am.
So we can take that condition out too, so we would be down, we would take, propose taking condition 1 and condition 3 off.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Condition 1 and
Oh, right,
condition
right.
3 would
Okay.
be removed from the recommendation, and if you're ready, I will make.
And
the
long
staff
term,
recommendation.
if and when, if the property, if the agricultural center property is redeveloped, as there was some discussion about a few years ago with the
Yeah.
rezoning application, and Dalamar is cut through or it's connected, so this really doesn't preclude any typical street section or access points into that property down the road.
No, I don't.
Or I think in my mind, an improvement to that right. It's still, it's a big right of way, so we have lots of room.
There's room to
Yeah.
make it work
In the
with
future,
whatever
make it,
happens,
yeah, some kind of wacky street.
If
Yeah.
I could add one
Yeah.
last thing, is that we would like to hear from the commission as to whether they feel comfortable enough that if they approve tonight, that we could potentially move straight into a preliminary final site plan rather than to have to go through a two-phase process. Again, just to be able to be efficient of time.
That's a staff recommendation.
Well, I think it's, that'd be a staff call, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff buried in there that we don't necessarily see, or we hear has been approved or been reviewed. So that'd be more of a staff call, I think. If they felt like whatever was left to be reviewed could be
But-
contained in one more review and not two more. I don't know if you're prepared to say that tonight or not, I
Yeah,
don't
well,
know.
we'll look, we'll take a look.
Take a look at that, but
Are you
I
okay
don't
with
think,
that?
I don't think we have a problem with
Yeah.
it. It's more, their engineering and architectural staff have to gear up for a final site plan.
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
yeah. I think conceptually, since it's concept plan, there aren't a lot of big outstanding issues, so I would assume that you could engineer this right straight through with something that looks fairly close to what we're looking at, but you never know, right, when you start
Understood.
mapping the utilities and things like that. Okay, any concerns? We'll start down at this end.
Well, I read the letter from one of the property owner, the adjacent property owner,
Yeah.
and I think you've addressed all of those issues. And the big concern was obviously the traffic study, and that's up to the state highway on 355, so I'm okay with whatever they've got so far.
And-
Okay.
But, I read that letter too, and I guess they were concerned about people parking there, but most places will say, parking only for that particular building and then subject to towing.
Signage.
That's how that's kind of, and that's an enforcement kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that as an issue
Okay.
for moving forward.
All right.
I'll double down on Danny's comment, just say I think it's a signage issue, but maybe the reverse, instead of the stick. You do good signage
Yeah,
that encourages folks
yeah,
to park in the
right.
lot. And for the record, I worked for Jeff for 13 years, but it was a long time ago, so I don't think it'll influence my analysis. But I think it's a comfortable building, and I like the sighting. I'm always nervous about pushing too far from the Pike, from 355. But I think that this is well justified in doing that, and certainly it actually opens up the opportunity to continue development in a 10, 20-year cycle.
Yeah.
It leaves a good development plot in front of it, so it's kind of, to me, from a long-range master plan standpoint, it's a good building, I think, and works really well. So.
All right. Any concerns with Ally?
No, I agree with what the other commissioners have said, and I appreciate the building taking the step that it's taking to meet the road and the setback that is basically hugging the right of way. And I think that's something that we should be seeing more as we're encouraging pedestrian activity, and it does that very well. And I like the idea of basically creating this A, B, C type of street hierarchy, where there's buildings that face 355, there's buildings that address Delmar, but there's this condition in the center that accommodates for the utilitarian aspect of parking. And I think it does create a really good framework for moving forward for densification of these areas. And yeah, it's just a well thought out plan. I think given the topography of this site, it also maximizes the exposure. And so, yeah, it's
Can I say I really like that idea of free ride home, that community engagement. I just think that is so cool.
What Danny's getting at is he needs a ride home
I need a ride
tonight. He's fishing for a ride home from here tonight.
They do not limit their clientele.
If there was a bar in the basement, it'd work out.
Right. The home in the basement, right?
But no, I think we do spend a lot of time from a planning standpoint talking about shuttles, talking about
Yeah, right.
shared
Yeah, just
rides,
like that
shared.
community engagement.
And
that's really
yeah,
unique.
and here's a business that recognizes
Yeah.
that and monetizes it, and that's wonderful. That's
You know,
perfect.
Along that same line, I think that, moving forward into potential redevelopment, this is a great way to urbanize this corner
Yeah,
already in
that was-
anticipation for development.
We actually did discuss that with them, that by pushing the building down and with the grade change, the way things work from 355, that if somebody were to work a deal with them and basically want to build up on 355 and let parking run under their store, that there might be some really good joint opportunities going
Yeah.
forward.
It's a good long-term
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, no, it fits nicely. And I think we were all a little nervous to see what would happen to the Golden Bull site, because it's not historic by historic district terms, but it does have a lot of storied history in the city, and it's a tough site. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
It's not right on 355. So, thank you for pursuing it. I think it's a good project, and it really will mean a lot to the, the ongoing incremental redevelopment of 355, which we've all had in our sites for a long time now. So,
Right.
that I think it's worked out
And
well.
will for the long
Yeah.
site in the future.
All right, so we've got a recommendation from staff to approve the concept plan, I think with two conditions now, right? The two and 4 are still alive. The proposal was to let them go to final, but we'll let staff be the judge of that based on some of the behind-the-scenes work that needs to be done. But I don't see anything major here that would preclude seeing a final site plan, so
Nothing from me.
Right.
we'll leave it to staff for that. And
We
let that
don't
be in
need
the
to, yeah,
record.
okay.
Any other concerns you want to include in the, all right, is there a motion, please, then?
Mr. Chair, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, the staff reports, staff findings, staff recommendations, and our discussion, grant SP 7789-2017 concept site plan approval, finding it conceptually in compliance with section 24170 of the city code with the two conditions read into the record.
Second?
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Good luck.
good luck.
Matt, how come you didn't bring up the fact that I helped introduce you to your wife?
Yeah, no. You still get credit for that. In a few more years, you might get blamed for that. I don't know.
Okay, that takes us to our last site plan for the evening, and that's SP-7805-2017, 315 East Diamond Avenue, construction of a 6-story mixed-use building, which includes 5-story multifamily apartments, 8,663 square feet of ground floor retail, and a 3-level parking garage in the CBD Central Business District zone. This is a preliminary and final site plan review. Presenting from staff is Jasmine Forbes. Good evening, Jasmine.
Good evening. Staff's before you to present preliminary final site plan application SP-7805-2017. This application is based upon concept site plan SP-7311-2016, which was approved by the Planning Commission on July 19, 2017. So the subject property is located at 315 East Diamond Avenue and is zoned CBD. The development also includes a portion to the south of 5 South Summit Avenue, which includes the Bud Car and the existing pedestrian boardwalk. So the applicant is requesting approval for a 6-story mixed-use building, which includes 5 stories of residential apartments, 8,663 square feet of ground floor retail, and a 3-level parking garage. So this application comes before the Planning Commission in accordance with Section 24-168, which requires the Planning Commission to grant final site plan approvals. Also, as part of this application, the applicant is requesting a waiver to permit reduced parking garage drive aisles and an increased garage ramp slope. The Planning Commission has the authority to approve parking waivers in accordance to Section 24-222A of the City Code. And the applicant is also requesting approval for the final forest conservation plan, ENV-7860-2018, pursuant to Section 22 of the City Code. And I'm going to have Kevin Ashes, who's the developer, to introduce the presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks, everyone. Kevin Ash, Ellisdale Construction and Development. Appreciate the opportunity tonight. First and foremost, I really want to thank Trudy and all of her staff for what we've all collectively accomplished over the last couple of months with regular meetings and really collaborative effort that I think brings us here tonight. So I want to thank everyone.
Great.
I want to turn it over to Steve Fatu, the architect.
Okay, great. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for having us back. It's been a few months since we were here, and we believe that, again, through some collaborative effort with the planning staff, we come with a much better project, an improved project, and looking for your approval this evening, hopefully. What I want to talk about briefly, and then hand it over to some of the teammates to talk in detail about the plan, and then back to me to sort of wrap up. I want to just tee up, I know that you're aware of the site and familiar with it, but I want to explain that some of the motivating factors that have shaped the building are obviously part of the Old Town Master Plan and the requirements that it sets out. So this is essentially a transit-oriented development, an opportunity for an urban building and a mixed-use building that is adjacent to transit. There is a plaza that is adjacent to the property, and it's really mutually beneficial that the two address each other. So we're very happy to address the plaza and have the building have a relationship to the plaza, because honestly the building really benefits from having that plaza and the transit station there. Just zooming in a little bit to the site plan and showing the plaza, really when we look at the elevations, I think it'll be easier to explain how the building addresses the plaza, but wanted to show the relationship here and also just point out some of the components of the site plan. The L shape, the white L shape, is the building footprint, which would be the mixed-use building, ground floor retail, and 5 stories of multifamily residential above. And then the bar that is below it and parallel to the train tracks is the parking garage. Separating the two is open space, and that's important just to note that the residential is double loaded, so there are units that face to the south and to the north. So it's important to have a separation from the garage so that units have windows facing south. And then just another little bit to point out is that there's a driveway that takes you from East Diamond, and that's shown all the way on the right-hand side of this page, from East Diamond to the garage at the rear of the site. And adjacent to that driveway, you'll see another curb cut right there, which is access to the loading dock. I'd like to hand it over to Phil Rhodes from AMT to talk a little bit about the engineering of the site itself.
Hi everybody, I'm Phil Rhodes from A. Morton Thomas. We're the civil engineers, and I'm going to talk through the site plan and touch a little bit on the grading and the landscaping as well. So as Steve mentioned, the site is bounded by East Diamond Avenue on the north and the CSX tracks on the south, the plaza that the city is developing on the west, and the Winkler-owned property on the east. The bulk of the site footprint is the new building, the proposed garage and associated ramp, there's also a few structural bioretention areas on the site that we're using to meet our stormwater management requirements. We worked through stormwater management approval recently. There's one structural bio between the ramp and the building, and the second one is in the southeast corner of the site. Also on this plan, I'd like to show you where the ADA accessible route is. The ADA spaces in the garage are located in the center of the garage here, and the route to the frontage where the retail access is, it uses this sidewalk just to the south of the building, goes to the east of the site. The building corner here was chamfered for visibility for pedestrians and for the incoming vehicular traffic, and then there's a sidewalk heading north on the east property line that takes you out to the site frontage. This next slide shows kind of that northeast portion of the site. It was one of the more intricately designed areas and a little tricky, but we worked through it with staff. As I mentioned before, this is the 88 route, the sidewalk on the east side of the site. There's 8 ADA access to the west using both of these crosswalks, one across the drive aisle to the garage, the second across the loading dock area. And there's also an accessible route to the east along the frontage of the Winkler property and beyond. We're proposing to relocate a Pepco pole that was in the northeast corner of the site, about 10 feet south. We needed to do this to ensure enough space for pedestrians to comfortably traverse that area, and also have enough room to lay out the curb geometry to provide adequate vehicular turning movements. Also along the east side of the site, we're proposing a retaining wall along the edge of our property. The topography of the site was a little tricky. It generally slopes from east to west, but because of our site layout and the need for that stormwater facility in the southeast, that was a low point, and this wall was designed along the east property line. Here's a few sketches of that wall. There's actually going to be a handrail that's not shown on the opposite side of the sidewalk as well, in between the sidewalk and drive aisle, but these sketches are just more to show the general height of the wall and the slope in that area. The wall, the top of the wall generally follows the topography of the Winkler site. It's right about at the existing ground level, maybe 6 inches higher, and the wall starts at about 1 foot high at the north end, and as it works its way down south along the eastern edge of our property, it becomes about 5 or 6 feet high, where it intersects with the stormwater facility. South of that point, the wall actually doubles as the wall for the bioretention facility as well. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the landscape plan and the forest conservation requirements. We're proposing to meet the forest conservation requirements with 7 trees in a continuous planter along the frontage of the property. They're American hornbeam trees, and they fully satisfy the site's forest conservation requirements. The other landscaping within the site is contained within the bioretention areas. These are native plants that are shade tolerant because they're in between the buildings and are more shrubs and tall grasses that you typically find in bioretention facilities. I'm now going to turn it over to Katie to talk about the garage a little bit.
Real quick, before you, just
Yep.
let me just interject one quick clarification. Where the driveway and the loading dock curb cuts intersect, we had some issues with, I think, the last time we looked at this in concept, some of the turning radii that were required to get out of the site if you were turning, I suppose, east, or I'm not sure exactly which way you're aligning this, but does moving the pole, the power pole, help with that, or is that still an issue that you have to turn into the oncoming?
It's not an issue. We've worked out all the turning movements with staff. They're comfortable with all the movements in and out, and moving that pole allowed us to redesign that curb a little bit in this area to get more comfortable.
It's more for pedestrian, that pole choked things for pedestrian and
Because one of the
geometry.
diagrams, and I don't know if it's still in the packet, but it showed, imagine you're leaving the site, right? But
I
to
think
comfort.
that's what Katie's gonna talk
Oh, you're
about.
gonna do the turning rate on the.
No, I'm going to talk about inside the garage, but
Yeah, I was actually on the street here.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yes,
So
no.
whoever has that geometry, feel free to jump in whenever the time is right.
Yeah, so it did get worked out. The turning, I imagine that, well, we worked it out so that 2 cars one could turn in and one could turn out at the same time
Mhm.
without crossing over,
Okay,
without
that's what I was
staying in
looking
their
for.
lanes. And by moving that pole, it helped with the geometry of the curbs
Okay,
and
good.
to maintain
Yeah,
those
all right.
truck turns.
Excellent. Sorry to cut you off.
No worries.
Keep going.
I'm Katie Wagner with Grove Slade. So as Jasmine stated, we are seeking a waiver to have for the drive aisle widths, and so we have taken a look at that for all 3 levels of the garage. The first level of the garage did not need the waiver, but then the upper 2 floors did. We took a look at the turning movements for that, And as you can see in this diagram, that it shows that the narrow point of the, there's essentially 61 feet for the vehicles to make their turning movements. And we wanted to figure out what was the largest vehicle that could make those turning movements. And so we looked at what it's the radius of vehicles making those turns. And so we determined that they had about 40 feet to make that U-turn. And so if you need about half a foot on each side to account for the mirrors, so we've determined that a car with a turning radius, curb-to-curb turning diameter less than 39 feet can be allowed on the upper two levels of the garage. And those measurements are easily available for all makes and models of cars.
Does that include SUVs and pickups, or would you
Yes.
limit those?
Yes, so
Yeah.
the garage would be managed.
No, but I don't think SUVs.
So the garage would be managed, so all residents that are moving in would have to register their vehicle, and the turning radius of the car would be checked, and there are spots available on the first level of the garage where they would be limited to
Okay.
the park.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
The other waiver, I just wanted to touch on that, is for ramp slopes, and wanted to use this elevation of the garage where it faces the residential, the mixed-use building, just for clarity. The first level of the garage, which is, I'm sorry, the first ramp level, which is covered by the second ramp level, is the one that is more steep. And basically we're requesting a waiver from the 8% limit to have 11.5% with 8-foot transition strips at the top and the bottom. And that transition strip allows, they're 8 foot wide at 8% to make sure that cars don't bottom out or middle out, if you would. So that's the first level ramp. And then the second level ramp, where it is exposed to the elements, it's only a little bit over the 8%, and we do also provide 8% transition strips once again, just to ease the 0.38% non-compliance between the maximum. So those are the ramp slopes.
So taken together, you know, the configuration of the parking garage is short on drive aisle and short on the slope that's required, but it's also a limited use garage, right? I mean, this is really only the residents of the residential component. This isn't a public garage at this point, right?
That's correct. The first level would have some spaces for retail parking, even though it's not required. They would be open for parking for retail. And we've also, one of the things in working with staff, which we did, is while we determined that the ADA access was going to go up through the middle of the site, as Phil pointed out, and I should just mention a nuance of that, is that the ADA access for the building just enters directly into the building there. Okay. This is retail ADA access that brings you out to the street. But also we maintained an entrance exit point to the plaza from the parking. And that's what I wanted to point out, that because I mentioned earlier that there's a real mutually beneficial reason to have the plaza and the building speak to each other and have a relationship. So one of those items that we've made sure is to maintain an access point between the garage and the plaza.
Okay, good. All right, what's next?
What's next is just a little bit of detail on the plan and then the elevations, because they've changed since we met before. The plan hasn't really changed. The retail that faces and activates the west side of the property facing the plaza is still there. We have actually added a new stair, and I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the public art component, because in our communications with the city, we basically have determined that the stair itself would have some decorative properties to it, and there's also an art fin on the building. But that's something new. There's also some potential for outdoor seating in this location right here at the northwest corner. The lobby, the multifamily residential lobby, is still in the same place. And then there's an opportunity for some retail that faces East Diamond. And then there are walk-up units that are located on the south-facing facade of the first floor. And this is a really unique residential product here. There are 4 units. They have potentially 18-foot tall ceilings. They would have their own private entrance as well as being able to be accessed from the lobby itself. So they're kind of a unique opportunity. It's one that Kevin has been excited about as well. And then the loading dock, as previously mentioned, on the exterior, and some back of house uses, maintenance room, storage rooms. And then Phil pointed out that we've chamfered the corner of the building right here just to make sure that there's visibility from cars and for potentially handicapped individuals.
So in configuring, so I'm glad you brought up the 18-foot thing because it reminded me, there's been some discussion, talk about the configuration of retail space that's really conducive to market demand for, the kind of rates you need for a building like this. So the fundamental question is, are these configured to do that, to fulfill that demand, whatever it is, heights, frontage, width, gross area, those sorts of things? Are they relevant sizes to really work?
There's 2 real components to that. The space that we've allocated to the plaza, that actually has 20-foot high ceilings, and the transfer slab that's above the retail before residential, so that's a flat horizontal transfer slab. So as you work further away from the plaza, the ceiling heights reduce down a little bit. But that corner, that anchor corner, is really a pretty useful spot. You could put loft seating in there. It's tall enough for that, so you could have multi-layers of seating for a restaurant. Steve and I are working on some concepts to really activate. We've seen where a lot of residential communities really want a bigger social space, and they're bringing in a coffee wine bar into the lobby that it's public during open hours, but then it's closed in the evening, and so we're working through some of those diagrams and
I think my question is more not so much what you might have planned, because that's great. I'm glad to hear there's some thought behind it. But if generally speaking, what the market would expect, what retailers would expect if you were just pulling somebody in.
I think the retailers are looking for a 16-foot high clear height, retail space.
And you certainly fulfilled that.
We've fulfilled that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just also, because we provided the opportunity that this could be a restaurant as well. So there's a black iron exhaust shaft located here.
Good.
So that is an opportunity. And then the other thing that we've done, which bears noting, is that the retail that faces East Diamond, rather than splitting it up with slab breaks, because yes, the grade, there's a 6-foot difference from west to east. What we've done is we've taken some great care actually to make sure that this is all one elevation. So it could be 1 tenant, it could be 3 tenants, but the name of the game for retail is flexibility, both now and in the future. So we've tried to make these spaces as flexible. Each space is level, doesn't have any slab breaks, has multiple entrance opportunities, and then there's also the opportunity for restaurant.
So there's multiple, like, I guess you've shown 3 doors,
Correct.
exterior doors.
Just looking at the square footage, we thought that 3 was the likelihood, the smallest retailer. Now, there actually is opportunity for more doors because, again, the frontage is all flat. We've made sure that the sidewalk is flat and that the retail is flat. And then similarly, this location, we're really hoping that it be 1 tenant, but if it happened to be 2 tenants, we've provided multiple doors that face west, as well as a main entrance that faces north.
So what are you envisioning for, like these, I guess you can't see my finger, but the 4, I guess there are 4 spaces opposite the ones I was just talking about, these 4 spaces?
Those are residential.
Those are, okay, that's residential.
Those are the 4 walk-up loft residential units.
Okay, okay.
And when we get to elevation, some of that will make a little bit more sense.
Okay,
because
elevations. I'm not mad, I don't have that vision.
So in working with staff and Steve's design, it's really trying to tie that plaza in, that restaurant, future restaurant site. It has, open garage doors, so they're, during nice weather, you can have a lot of, people, in that space and activate both the plaza and, this project. So that's what we're really hoping for. And, again, working with, arts within the city, creating that stair connectivity to the plaza, it really helps activate it.
just want to point out two more things to move on from the plan. There is a little area right here behind, between the garage and between the back entrance to the lobby, which is a court, and there's an opportunity for some picnic benches and some grills back there. So this is one of those opportunities where communal space Kevin was referring to, it's an outdoor communal space. And then directly to the west of that, with windows that would face to that plaza, or court, I should say, is the fitness area, so a fitness room. Just for reference, the upper floor shows the double-loaded corridor. The confluence, or the large number of ins and outs, I should say, on the facade, because we're trying to break down the scale of a relatively tall building and make sure that it is conforms with sort of its neighbors and has a contextual elevation. So what you're seeing here are ins and outs of the facade that have balconies, that are material changes, and that really transitions to a conversation about the elevations. And before we look at them, I just wanted to point out some of the big changes. The biggest change is the first bullet point, is that at concept, we were showing an elevation that was on a flat ground. There's a 6-foot elevation difference. And you can see that in just the faded out elevation there. We'll see it in a moment in color. So landing the building, this was a really big deal, introducing the real grades and figuring out how we were going to make the retail be more flexible and not have slab breaks. The refinement of the design, there were some other things that happened that weren't related to the grade change. Minor details, the enlarging the cornice, adding downspouts, that's something we needed to do for stormwater management as well. And the walk-up unit entries, which we're really excited to show you today. And then also we had a Historic District Commission hearing, and we had a really productive and fruitful conversation. There were suggestions made, recommendations, and we really felt very strongly about 2 or 3 of them, and we're very happy to receive them, is actually, you know, it's sometimes when you're looking at a drawing, you don't realize some of the issues with it. You're in
too close, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of the comments was that we've talked about the building being contextual and expressing weight through masonry, the weight of the building being coming down all the way down the ground. Well, I'll show it in the larger elevation as well, but underneath this this expression of a bay window, there were no piers underneath, and it really felt like it was floating. So there was a request to add more masonry piers there. We did that. And then on the rear, the same thing was happening with the walk-up units. There were no masonry piers between the walk-up units, and there was a very good suggestion that we took up. And then another suggestion, which was our loading dock door was just we were showing it as a metal roll-up door, and we have this really activated front facade with a lot of storefront and these masonry piers coming down. And so the suggestion was, would you be willing to make the garage door a glass door? And we thought, sure. I mean, that's another thing that would just make the front facade even better. So now you're seeing it in color. You're seeing the grade change. You're seeing this flat ground right here for these. Really, all of these windows are that one retail space that faces the north. Yeah. And so that's a level ground. There's a little bit of ramping. Yeah. We had to, in order to create that level ground, we have to ramp quickly before we get to the lobby entrance, and that's right here. And you're seeing the garage door that's changed to glass, the new brick piers that are here to just express more weight carrying. And then this railing right here is that potential for an outdoor seating area that I mentioned previously in plan. Below is the south elevation, which shows the garage that faces the CSX tracks. You're seeing a brick pattern, as mentioned during concept plan. It was a condition for approval that the brick texture be on the garage. And you're seeing the elevation of the building beyond, and we also have that shown without the garage in front of it.
Maybe you should put a penthouse on it now for cell towers.
Yeah.
I'll come back.
So the top elevation here, west facing the plaza, and this is where we feel, again, the mutually beneficial relationship between the plaza and the building. The garage doors, awnings, signage, we'll get into signage shortly. Really trying to activate the facade. It's not a side elevation, it's really another front elevation. And then you're also seeing the access point for the garage there. And just in case this question comes up, there is a desire for the garage, the first floor, to feel really open and airy and light, and so we decided to remove the spandrels, the solid spandrels, and we are showing cable rails there. So that is really, we think that it's a way of making that first floor where there is public parking just feel more open and light. The opposite side, the east, faces the Winkler property. You're seeing that we don't really have secondary or backside architecture here. We are carrying the language of the building on all sides. And so we have that sort of bay window expression facing east. We have the masonry, and then the two-tone of fiber cement on the top floors, which is helping to reduce the height of the building. And then final elevations I want to show you are this within that courtyard that faces the garage. We have the south elevation and then a little bit of east elevation that faces that courtyard. And this is the fitness room that has some glazing that faces the courtyard. And then this is that rear entrance into the lobby. And then what you're seeing here are ganged together 2 walk-up unit entries and 2 walk-up unit entries. And in between, there's glazing that would provide light and air. And you can see really 12-foot tall windows. So it's not just a window, but it's also a clear story window above that because of the height of those units in there.
So what are you doing for HVAC in the units themselves? Are there grills we're not seeing in these elevations? Or
On each of the decks, there's a side facing.
It's facing into the alcove.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Correct.
Nice detail.
Thank you.
Top floor. What happens on the top floor?
Would likely be grills that are painted to match.
Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, small detail, the public
Big
art.
detail.
A detail of the elevation, yeah, absolutely. So we're actually really excited about this because this is an opportunity for the building to have an additional identity element, but really it's something that attracts attention and introduces an artistic element to the building. And I think you've had some ideas about how this might get commissioned.
Yeah, we've been talking, with the art director here about having a contest between some different artists on whose art's going to go up on the fin and on the risers of the steps. We're planning on downlighting this so that we can bring light and a focus to this rear corner where the Bud car will ultimately be at that corner. It's a rear corner of the parking garage. So really having a lot of activity all along this frontage and along Diamond Ave. So it ties in nicely with the plaza.
Good. Okay. All right.
Last thing I want to point out is there's a lot of retail signage as well as building signage that's been shown on the elevations, and we have submitted guidelines for how these would be governed. And really the idea of the guidelines is that they be flexible while also providing some restrictions. So, for example, we don't want light boxes. We want channel letters. So that's one small thing. But for the most part, we want to provide tenants flexibility so that they can have their identity, their brand identity, their own fonts, their own colors, but fit within a fairly flexible restriction, and that it's aligned with the Old Town guidelines as well. So within our guidelines, this is a highlight of what's been submitted, is that we look at elevation and we focus on the red boxes are details, and then each one of those gets a blow up and additional information and detail on how that's restricted. And then the same thing for building signage above. So for example, if Kevin decides to name the building or wants to put a number or sign or logo or something, those are also guidelines that are covered within what's been submitted. And that's our presentation. Thank you very much.
I guess on the signage, Ms. Jasmine, this is consistent with what we have for the Old Town Guidelines.
Yes, so they kind of pulled everything from the
Yeah.
Old Town Design Guidelines in their sign package.
It's consistent. Yeah, good. All right, any questions for the applicant?
At this point.
No? All right, is there anyone here from, that would like to testify or comment on this application? Please, you know the routine, jump up to the podium here and introduce yourself. Good evening.
My name is George Winkler. I own the property to the east of it. First, I want to say, I was, as the property owner, I was never contacted on this project at all by either the staff nor the applicant. So we didn't have any exchanges on this till just this past Friday. So I just want to make that clear. I like some things on the project, and there's some things that I think that need some consideration. And then when the concept was introduced, we weren't notified either. So I'm just letting you know that there's not, the communication's not as good as it needs to be.
We'll sort that out.
Yeah.
With your time, is there any specific points you want to let us know
Yes,
about?
there is. Yes, there is. With the restaurant right next door to us that we were getting ready to open up, they just spent $450,000 to do that place, and since they're going to lose the parking, they pulled out. And that's why they pulled out, is because of the parking. The rest of the tenants in the building, that's customer parking for them now, and employee parking, and that's 80 spaces over there. That right now, when that goes away, we're going to lose the rest of the retail on the street, because that's dependent on that right now. And I was talking with staff today about it, and as I went to the apartment building next door, trying to secure some parking. They are trying to secure parking in the building across the street in the parking garage, which is all well and good, but I don't think this project should move forward until that's secured. Because
Okay, so let me make sure we're clear about this. Would you pull up, Jasmine, or somebody pull up the site plan, just so we get oriented around
The aerial.
Mr. Winkler's, the condition he's talking about, the existing parking and what.
Yeah. Right there. That parking right now, that lot right now is currently used by tenants of our building, tenants of the buildings down the street, Victor Litz, all those stores, the law offices across the street use it. I mean, that's all parking used now by the local businesses.
Gotcha, okay, and I'm following what you're
And
saying.
and we just took parking away from the square. We just reduced that parking. So now we're gonna take out the only last bit of parking we have left.
Okay, is that parking, I'm not treating this, I'm treating it like a question I asked, just so I'm clear on what's going on. Is that parking on a cross-access agreement, or is it just considered city public parking right now? What is the status of it?
It's city public parking.
Okay. Okay. So there really isn't a need for agreement on that specific lot, it's just
No, but
open to be used?
I'm sure Mr. Lonergan can address that after Mr. Winkler.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what else?
Mr. Winkler, can you pull the microphone down?
Sure,
So that,
yeah, no
thank
problem.
you.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
And also, what kind of consideration from the businesses in town during this construction? Because when they did the building across the street, they were able to construct and load in on 4 sides. On this project, there's only one, only on the front of the sidewalk. So at the time, I owned Winkler Automotive Service Center. I don't anymore, I sold it a few years ago. At the time, when the construction was going on, we lost a significant amount of business that year. And this project will actually hurt us more because the streets are going to be blocked off most of the time. And, so that needs to be taken, there's some consideration, that the whole thing the whole thing needs to be taken into consideration for everybody else around there. Because this is a large building on a very small site. And there's a lot going on here.
Fair enough.
And I also need to point out one other thing that I don't think the engineers have taken into account, and if they had contacted me as a property owner, I would enlighten them on. you have Williams Telecommunications line going through your parking garage. And the reason I know this is because when I did my boardwalk on the back of my building 23 years ago, they weren't going to let us build that boardwalk. And after we started construction back there, we had an army on us trying to shut us down, and they did, construction-wise. But I finally got them to agree to let me build that boardwalk on top of the fiber optic line. And we had to hand dig those poles. And we hit the fiber optics about 3 to 4 feet down every pole.
So what you're pointing out, I think what you're saying
pointing out is they have the parking garage, part of the parking garage going through a fiber optic line, because it's not where, you know, it's
okay,
it's
so
not
we
where
need
it's
to research
marked.
the easement for that then.
Well,
See, yeah.
well, the easement won't show it, because the easement's wrong. And I'm telling you, because when they start digging, they're going to come out there.
Okay, I
And
appreciate that.
and here's the other clincher. Well, they haven't marked on their part. There's a concrete pole. Okay, where that concrete pole is, there's a splice box. That splice box, every mile there's a splice box. Well, that's sitting where the building is. So all this in a line, I think I just need to I would suggest you make a stipulation that gets solved first before anything can go forward, because otherwise I see it turn into a mess.
I appreciate that insight. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Is that all? Time's up, but we got into a conversation there. So is there any other point you wanted to hit?
I have a question on the loading dock, as far as how deep is the loading dock?
Okay, we'll get that answered. Because I want to go back, Jazz. Is that all, Ben?
Yeah, for right now, yes, sir.
Okay. Jasmine, on the point about notification, can you just confirm the setup for that, please?
So we always tell our applicants, if you're doing a big project, you always gotta be kind to neighbors and notify. So when we do our postcards and our sign postings, we get our addresses from the state tax assessment.
Okay.
So I guess the state tax assessment hasn't updated the address according to where they need to send information to you. I think that's where.
But he did get notice for this
He did get
hearing.
a postcard.
I got it on Wednesday.
Which we just sent it out on Monday,
Monday.
so.
Okay.
Just for this. But no notification on anything, no communication at all whatsoever by staff or the applicant, any way, shape, or form on this project at all. Up till just.
But I guess I'm looking for is the steps that are required for notification, those were in place?
Yeah, those are in place.
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, we like to have.
Well, you might have them in place, but they don't work.
No, I mean for this project, the notices went out as prescribed, right? Okay. All right, thank you. We'll get into some of these points. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? No particular order, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Margie McHale. I'm an owner, 20 years this June at Aurelia Salon Spa on East Diamond Avenue. Your building sounds fabulous, beautiful, wonderful. I'm in business. It would be a disaster. I mean that from my heart, from my business. East Diamond Avenue is so overcrowded. People coming in and out. The buildings they built across the street, not one retail has been occupied. And I think that was a stipulation of why they were able to build for the retail. Not one. It can't handle it. My business would compromise immensely. I use that parking lot. There is no parking. I own a salon and spa. Women can't walk at night over to this garage across the street here, including my employees who have a lot of tips in their pockets. We make do. George's makes do, but I run a very successful business, as do many other people in the area. It is overpopulated all the time. The doctors next door, we don't have enough parking as it today.
Okay.
This is a huge problem and it concerns me greatly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What is the net parking? So once all is said and done, how many parking spaces are available to the public after this project is done? Or is it only for the retail
It's
spaces?
for retail and residential.
So that lower level wouldn't be public per se, it would just be available to the retail space. Okay. All right, is there anyone else? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Gray Morsley. I'm actually the person who bought Wicklow Automotive Service Center.
Okay, great.
I had heard about, a project coming up on that property, and I think it's a great project. I think so. I think it'd be good. But like Mr. Winkler raised it, and the owner of Aurelia Salon, I think from a parking standpoint, we have to be very careful as a city of how we go about doing this project. You're going to subtract right away 80 public parking spaces that are not only shared by all the retailers on that street already, but then that are going to be fought over by the added retailers that you plan on having in there, notwithstanding the restaurant, which I imagine would have a capacity of about at least 80 to 100 people. So I really don't see, from a parking standpoint and understanding exactly where the situation is like already traffic-wise, how this impacts us. As of today, on my lot, which is very strict and we manage very well because we don't have that much space, we're fighting every day people who come and park in our lot thinking it's public parking. I don't want to keep fighting that fight 10 times more when you guys set up that beautiful building. So I am not against improvement, I'm not against progress, but I am very for that we work as a community and find the answer to that parking issue, which I think, and I agree with Mr. Winkler, that without the parking issue being clear and mandated from the get-go, I don't think that this project should move forward. I also now own a very successful business downtown Gaithersburg. I consider myself a growing part of this community. I contribute to this community. I participate in many ways, and I want to be continuing to do this, and I'd hate to have a project that starts out and could spell disaster for everybody else on the street.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'm James Clifford. I've got the law office across the street from this project, as well as some of the buildings further down towards the corner. No one's communicated with me on this, and I think Mark showed how this is done. What you do is you call your neighbors, you tell them what you're doing, you sit down, you work out the details, and you might learn something, because some of us have been here for 30, 40 years watching how things work, and it's a good practice. It's too late now to go back and fix it, but I'm going to invite you to come and meet with us if you'd like. And there's a bunch of us who've been here for a long time. No time for answers, but I would like to ask my questions. What size is the lot and how many units per acre? This is important to me because I sat here and did the Archstone project, and I remember the rules. I remember how the height was determined. I remember all of the things that we went through. I'd like to see what's the thought process this time, and why would it be any different. How will the building construction be staged? I'm really interested in that. I don't know where, if you had staged it off of the new park and then built the new park, that would have made a lot of sense. But building the new park and then building this building, how are you going to stage it? What's going to happen to the rest of the uses in town? I don't get this loading dock at all. I don't understand why it's where it is, and I wonder how it's going to affect our parking garage or our parking lot directly across the street. Our entrance doesn't match up with the new park. It matches up with the front of their building, and I'm very confused at how that's going to work. How will the city protect the parking? Will the retail be pre-leased? Because much like everyone else, I found it very disappointing that Archstone project never got retailed, truthfully retailed. It was done in a way that it hasn't been. I've sent 4 tenants, maybe 5 tenants over to Archstone that should have rented, and it didn't get rented. Something's wrong there, and it wasn't because there wasn't a demand. There was. I think this idea of getting together with the owners is just good politics. Big problem we have with Archstone that nobody explained or understood is, are you going to have pets? And if you are going to have pets, if you're going to have dogs, did you notice that you don't have any place for your dogs to go? The best place in town is our law office, because that's where everybody in the Archstone project takes their dogs. And so we can't keep any grass, but we let it happen because we realize that there's no other place to go. If you're going to have pets, please consider where these dogs are going to go, because right now it wasn't considered before, and it is a major problem for us. with undergrounding of lines, will the lines be underground from the building? I'd like to know if that's gonna happen. And MPDUs, I assume we're not having any MPDUs, and I'm assuming it's $1 a unit under this, for this project? And I'm not sure where you guys left the MPDU surcharge. I'd like to have that answer at some point too.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's attack a couple of the questions. Jasmine, the MPDU issue, the affordable housing component.
In Old Town, affordable housing is not required.
Okay. So there won't be any in this project?
That's correct.
Okay.
There's actually a requirement. There was no affordable housing, this was all market rate.
Okay. Let me check, let me just see if there's anybody else that wants to testify or comment, and then we'll get into some of these questions, I think, kind of wholesale, because they came up a couple of times. Is there anyone else that would like to comment?
I said one thing just real quick.
Come on up to the microphone.
Sure.
And just reintroduce yourself, because we'll be
Sure.
taking the transcript from the tape.
I'm Margie McHale, owner of Aurelia Salon Spa on 317 East Diamond. The only other thing I was thinking about as well was your loading dock is on the main street, yes? And there's ride-on buses that stop on that street, and there's on schedule, and I find that to be a big conflict as I was sitting here thinking.
Okay.
And that street, again, is extremely congested as of today, and the ride-on buses, and it's a very narrow street. Just
Okay.
something to think about when we have a lot of people in this town riding buses.
Good, okay, thank you. So let's address this loading dock. I guess one of the fundamental question is, what is the loading dock for at this point? Is it really just trash
Resident
for the
move-in.
units?
Resident move in and trash.
Okay, so it's not getting major deliveries and,
Well, for the restaurant also.
Yeah, if they need that, I mean,
Yeah.
they might get that right off the street though, if they're,
The corridor goes all the way to the restaurant.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. But it's not as intense as it's a relatively low amount of commercial space relative to a loading dock.
8,000 square feet
Yeah.
less.
Okay.
Not inconsequential.
So how deep is it? Will the truck be able to pull past the
It's
sidewalk?
41 feet deep. It's designed to comfortably situate a 30-foot truck.
Without having to block the sidewalk?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
You can see on this slide that's up here now shows a 30-foot truck in the 41-foot deep loading dock.
Okay. Let me go next. Jasmine, just generally speaking, the parking issue and some of the conversation about what city staff has done to think about balancing the parking that's available now versus after a project like this would be built. What sort of
Why don't we let
calculations
Tom
or
Lonergan
considerations?
respond to that?
Tom, okay.
City economic development staff has been asked to look at this with the understanding that the premise of the city's buying this building 20 years ago, as I understand it, was always to redevelop.
Right.
This parking was at one time affiliated with the building that was there. So it's been nice for several years for this parking to be available for the business community. That's been terrific, but there's been an understanding that this would one day be affiliated again with a project on the land. The mayor and council have asked us to try to find
Adjacent parking.
other areas nearby where potentially we could offset some of the parking being lost here. We are negotiating with an adjacent landowner
Okay.
to potentially have most or all of the spaces that are being taken here being replaced across the street. It's still preliminary, but
Fair enough. So to paraphrase, we're essentially turning back, in terms of parking availability, we're turning it back to where it was when it was a Fisherman building and had dedicated parking for that use. Wasn't public parking, it was, it belonged to the project at the time. But there is some work underway to begin to create more parking opportunities on that side of Summit, that side of
The other
the
side
Old
of
Town,
Diamond.
or Diamond, excuse me. Well, as opposed to trying to use the garage, the city garage as the location for parking, so you can.
Yes.
You're staying with this, okay. And is there news about that, or it's really just a work in progress?
It's a work
take some
in
time?
progress.
Okay. All right. Very good, thank you. What else we got? Loading dock. Has MBTUs. All right, so then the next big one is staging. Some discussion, maybe the owner, the applicant's team can talk about how this will be staged to
Yeah, sure.
dovetail with the activity that's already going on in Old Town.
Sure. We're gonna do a prefabricated steel garage, so the erection of the garage would happen first. Secondarily, there'll be steel and concrete for the retail, and then panelized wood frame construction above. So we'll be using a mini mobile crane on site to pick the wall panels. The framing of this project will last about 6 weeks. So the loading, that will be intensely loading off of Diamond Ave onto each platform, but that's going to be about a 6-week process. After that, all the work will be done inside the building. So the majority of the work, short of the framing, will all be on site, and there'll be on-site parking for tradesmen because the garage will be built first.
Okay. And what about the, you said early on, the offloading from Diamond would be necessary, but how about over the life of the construction?
No, just during the portion of going vertical for the wood frame portion of the residential piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be about a 6-week period of time.
That's it, because it's panelized.
And it'll be offloaded, first in the morning. Nothing, loading will happen from, 7 to 9:30, and then nothing after that until the next morning.
Okay.
We've done this many a time in even more tight and urban locations. The trucks coming in with the wall panels prefabricated will stage off-site at another location that we'll determine, and we'll pull them in one at a time. We'll load each floor level with all the wall panels, stand those up, bring the trusses next, but all that is just quick offloading.
So are you or representatives from your company nearby, and what I'm leading up to is maybe it would be healthy to have some standing meetings with the local merchants. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And
I do apologize, everybody here.
Whatever form is appropriate, to kind of stay after some of these details and some of these things that aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily legislated, but they'd be good practice to keep everything running smoothly.
And one of our conditions is that they have to submit that construction staging plan for the city for approval.
Right.
Prior.
But I'm thinking of more the ongoing issues, smaller issues that might not necessarily show up on a predetermined plan, but would be nevertheless issues to
very
resolve.
well, ongoing monthly meetings with whomever would like to meet to talk about the project.
Okay.
As we, this is obviously one big step forward, but there's a lot more steps from here before we actually start. So
right.
A lot more communication can occur then.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up in terms of the communications process. Is there an opportunity for something to be different about that process as far as individual businesses in that adjacent, that are right next door to this knowing about something?
We always encourage applicants to meet with their adjoining property owners and talk with them. So that was encouraged months and months ago. So.
Okay, and because we just don't want there to be, any sour grapes.
I was misinformed as who the property owner was, and George, I think you and I have had a little bit of dialogue about that.
I've had no dialogue with you, sir. I don't have any, and I don't mean to come across wrong.
Yeah, no,
I've done the project, but nobody's communicated me at all.
No, I meant just who I thought was,
My name, you said my name, Winkler Property, multiple times here tonight, so obviously you knew whose property that it was.
Okay, well, we'll get this sorted out, I think, after the meeting and make sure that there's some
right. That's all I
opportunities
wanted
to get
to know.
together. Let me get back to the plan real quick. So the loading dock, driveway access, the gang curb cuts, is there some attention to, we've often talked about pedestrian connectivity through Old Town and other areas, how that is enhanced there so it doesn't feel like you're trying to cross this sort of vast gap of traffic, and it's pedestrian first, traffic second sort of look and feel, and it's in fact safe to cross a double curb cut. Is that something you guys have detailed yet, or you're working through?
Well, one of the primary ways that we're trying to make it safer is that there's an area of refuge between the two, and that would have paving much like the paving on the sidewalks.
Mhm.
So it would be tactile, it would be different than the driveway. So that would really signal for a pedestrian that that's a safe moment.
What about the
between.
crosswalks themselves?
I mean, the crosswalks themselves, they're wide, they're striped, I mean, they're clearly marked,
I think another thing is that we talked about the loading door,
Mhm.
that it's made to look like it
Right.
blends in with the rest of the infrastructure, and so by having that shut,
I think what I'm looking for is something that, I don't know if the crosswalk is painted or is just striped,
you have
two
to,
stripes.
you have to have the crosswalk striped to a certain standard that's.
No, I understand that, but what we can also do is create a more pronounced pedestrian-friendly walkway there that isn't just a perfunctory crosswalk, but that's something that helps to slow down traffic, helps to announce that's a crosswalk, makes it more vivid, makes it more apparent. And I just want to make sure we've attacked that directly. I don't necessarily need to know what that detail is at this moment, but Jasmine, maybe you can, go back and take a look at that with them. But the idea is that, what we're learning in other parts of the city is the minimum standard is fine, but it's not necessarily enough in an area where you're really promoting pedestrian circulation. It needs to be more. It needs to be more apparent. It needs to be more dramatic, and whatever word you want to use. And I don't know if it's literally this on the plan, which is a bunch of stripes, it's sort of the Abbey Road crosswalk, or if it's, the minimum standard, I think is just parallel lines right now.
Right,
So-
we didn't want the parallel, with having the striping, as you called the Abbey Road, because of the white in the pavement, the pedestrians are more visible.
Mhm.
And that's certainly what our, the person that came and looked at Kentlands Boulevard said, to switch to that type of crosswalk design to make it much more visible. The
And that
pedestrians
is in fact
visible.
what will be here. That's
Right.
not just a graphic thing, that's actually the configuration.
Yes.
Okay.
These crosswalks were also designed to match the ones going in on the plaza next door too, so there's some sense of connectivity.
Okay,
down
great,
the
good,
street,
good,
yeah.
okay. Excellent. And then the retaining wall finishes, just if you wouldn't mind by using the plan, I saw those concept elevations, those sort of diagrammatic elevations. Which side faces what in terms of elevation change and what the finish really would be?
Almost essentially the whole wall faces our side of the property.
Right, but
Yeah.
what is it? Is it just smooth concrete? Is it stone? Is it brick? Is it?
Currently smooth concrete.
Smooth concrete, okay. With no buffer to landscape in front of it, right?
Actually, I think you guys are proposing.
And that's part of the
wall.
It's adjacent to the sidewalk for the first 60 feet or so.
Okay, so again, kind of in that same spirit of trying to make sure we put pedestrians first, I think that's worth looking at as whatever finish is there is something that's a little bit more pedestrian, less parking garage.
Sort of like when they do I always forget it, the molded, they use mold to make like a brick finish.
A lot of options, yeah.
There's all kinds of things. Be better if it was real of some kind, but that's okay potentially. Could be some more artsy texture, artsy embossing,
It just has a sterile quality that makes it unappealing and uninviting.
Good. All right, anything else? What else?
The railing on top of that wall.
Go ahead.
It's another element that's obviously not been designed, I think, so.
There's been some dialogue between the city and ourselves just as of yesterday of trying to tie the railing design in with the plaza railing design, and that's I think that's actually a condition.
That would be the railing on the other side of the building. This is a different railing, so.
Right.
So you would want this railing to match whatever we have over
Yeah.
at the plaza, which would most likely be with a vertical railing.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I mean, you guys aren't concerned, part of the problem we had across the street is that those retail bays were not designed properly. They're designed too shallow, so they have a large amount of storefront for improper amount of depth. You can't get a store, can't get any kind of restaurant in there. You have no back of house for those restaurateurs. So 40-some feet kind of breaks some retail rules here. You guys are pretty confident that you can?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually been already approached. I don't know if it will be pre-leased. We have been approached by some users already, and I mean, we're still a long ways off from
Right.
delivery.
I mean, I would almost like you to hold on some of that storefront until you can get some tenants in there. You know, the storefront's very regularized and a little monotonous, you know, as it goes down the street, and retailers obviously need a great deal of expression, particularly in a small town, you know, street like this.
Yeah.
You know, if it was a way to allow them to express themselves a little bit in that 20 feet of glass, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Rather than a sort of office building storefront, you know.
Yeah, we've talked with the staff that, you know, if different users, I mean, again, you know how this goes. I mean, that's probably one of the last elements that goes in to a job like this, but we have to design to something for now.
Sure. I think if you put it in your final site plan, though, to say, look, we're going to, you know, potentially come back with revised elevations in these areas, you know, with a tenant-specific design, it would be in your approved site plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas of now, you have a set glazing pattern in your, you know, in your approved final site plan, potentially approved final site plan.
And what that may look like on a submittal, and we've seen this before, is essentially the gap between the column bays is a dashed line with, you know, almost like a TBD kind of graphic. It's, you know, so that it can reflect whoever becomes the tenant.
Yeah, I think this is a great TBD graphic. I think, but I'm waiting to see what the B is. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind highlighting those areas for
Okay.
either end to be flexible.
But so again, I'm not asking you know, to do something for me. You know, you'd have to back that up, you know, with going to your tenant and demanding something a little more than just accepting a large pane, you know, anodized aluminum office system. You know, you'd have to push them a little bit with a design guideline. You have to push them a little bit, you know. So if you're not behind it, then there's no point in putting it on your plan. But if you understand that, and because I think you're already challenged in your depth, it's a challenging retail environment to begin with. You have a very stubborn landlord across the street who's just not going to lease those things.
Yeah,
They're very
that's what I
stubborn.
hear.
And so you know you're going to have a challenge. There's a parking challenge, obviously. So you've sort of set yourself up for a lot of challenges. It's not defeat, but it's a lot of challenges. So I think your storefront's one of your few areas where you've got an opportunity to express your tenants. So the signage package looks great. The storefront package isn't here. You know, so I don't know.
Okay.
Does that look like a condition to you, or just something for the record for staff to keep an eye on?
It has to be a motivated piece, you know, beyond some sort of approved site plan. So, you know, like, to me, there's no condition I can put on here to.
Yeah, I understand.
But I'm worried.
So there's two things I do want to amplify or somehow get into the moving forward steps here. The first is the idea of the applicants meeting with the local community on whatever is on their mind and whatever issues may be in play. The second is, Tom, I don't know how to get a little bit more ahead of and a little bit more visible with parking solutions. You know, I don't want to press you tonight, but and I know some things are in the works, but maybe that could be part of the same meeting that you could help through. I mean, there's some time, I think, relatively long lead time before this is really going to impact that parking lot. So maybe there's time to work some of that out ahead of that. Is that fair? Or? Yes. Okay.
Glad you brought that up, because that was something I was going to bring up, that I'd like to hear how that progresses.
Yeah, and I think it's an extension of the staging, essentially.
Yeah,
Do
I'd like
you
to
think it
hear how
rises
that
to a condition to say, look, we can't, this site plan can't be approved until we have an agreement?
I'll be careful about that. And here's my grounding for that. It's a public lot now.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's not an agreed to, like a contractual obligation.
Exactly.
But with the economic development director in the room, we'd be silly not to put a lot of emphasis on solving for that,
right,
so that they're ready to go. So I think
strongly urge.
I think the condition is that staff work with the community, with the local business community.
Applicant work with
Applicant and staff, because staff is involved, to work on a parking strategy for whatever that looks like, whether it's 80 or 60 or 2, whatever the right number is, to take some of the, pick up some of the slack.
Right.
You know, dumb free advice is that it's really a pedestrian plan, right? It just happens to have an end result in a car, right? So it's really trying to come up with a pedestrian plan for that retail street to feed through to whatever car spot storage you're going to try and find. But it's really a pedestrian plan that happens to end in parking.
All right. Does that cover the concerns, do you think? Do we, any other?
Yeah, I'm
Finished.
Go ahead, is that?
I had one more concern. You know, when this application first came before us, I had not been to the Railroad Museum. And they have a little plaza that this proposal is cutting into. And it dead ends right into the facade of the garage that you're opening, that you're leaving the railing open. So your west elevation all the way to.
Maybe pull the plan up, you could reference the plan?
I think the elevation is
Okay.
it's the best way to address
Okay.
it. I think that you're taking some steps in addressing the steps and the signage. I think that's another great opportunity for a blank wall, perhaps a mural, perhaps something that will activate that area. It's a fun, playful area right now. You know, I visited with my kids. You go through the carts, you get out. It's a little tiny plaza off the parking area.
We're working right now, excuse me, sorry, we're working right now with staff to relocate the Bud car. So this area in front of the garage, you know, we're working through the site plan now of, you know, what that's ultimately gonna look like. So
Okay,
there will be another plan.
Great, because yeah, I saw that you'll be relocating the cart, and you're cutting that little brick plaza in half. So I just want to see, there's a playful, fun little sitting area where kids like to. It's really the only place where they get to be a grade and observe the CSX or the mark going by. And that's, you know, exciting for my kids anyway. Exciting, and so I just thought, rather than just meeting it with a blank facade of a garage, there's quite a bit of other alternative uses that could happen to not take away from the functionality of that and public aspect of it. Because right now it's just reading like a utilitarian transitional space.
Agreed, and one of the conditions you may have seen is to come back with a plan for the 5-foot space, which is between our property line and the face of the garage when the Bud car gets relocated. So we intend to have a design there. We've been talking about landscape and hardscape, and you know, the suggestion that it be playful is a very good one.
And while I'm aware of that, I think the facade plays a very important role on how that is ultimately finished.
And to address your seating concern, part of how we designed the side stair is to have cheek walls on either side that are 18 inches, so that is a seating area, so somebody can sit there, you know, in the park.
Yeah, I agree, but
I think it's easy. I think you got a big facade there on the end of your garage that you don't need to go through, but you need it to be transparent. So you know, you do some piece of art that's on that whole side of that garage. You can grow a Gaithersburg tree, you know, on wire. You can do, you know, there's 1,000 different things that you can do there. But I think looking at a plan is going to be a mistake. I think you're right that this is the main sort of living room wall of this little space. Sure. This little living room. So it's begging for something, a big mural, big piece of art, you know, greenery, something. So.
Where does that happen? I mean, it's a condition now that more be done with that strip.
Staff will come back to the planning commission when we finally decide the relocation of the Bud car and the design.
Okay.
In between.
Yeah, I think you really need to see how the Bud car does affect and where it's located before we talk about.
Definitely a final design, but that wall needs something.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
That wall, I keep calling it a wall, but it's two spandrels of a garage, right?
So silly.
There's a lot of architectural opportunity there for something, and it doesn't have to be a wildly expensive item. It can be just a grandiose, you know.
It has to be addressed, and I think that if we could add it to potentially, like, you know, including the design of the elevation of the garage to the condition, then.
What number condition was that about the Bud car?
Number 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I guess part of the preliminary approval was that it had a brick spandrel. So I guess that we're meeting that condition that was already addressed early on, that it had to have a brick spandrel, so.
Yeah.
Do you want us to revise condition number 6 to include the garage elevation?
Correct.
I think it should be a separate.
It can be, but you're right,
separate
Trudy, it's
condition.
also integral to the design of the Bud car plaza,
Right.
so, yeah. But it could be a separate,
Well, since it's driven by the need to finalize whatever happens at the Bud Car Plaza. I mean, that's the fundamental need, is to resolve that.
Mhm.
It just goes into 3 dimensions and climbs up the wall somehow. It may not be that profound, it may be a fairly subtle thing. I would just include it in 6, that, you know, separate site plan and modifications to the garage elevation for the final Bud Car location. And let's call it that, because we may discover some other thing that emerges that's appropriate, but just to include that in that last step. Where do we put, how do we handle the parking question and how we might be looking forward at a
Would that
parking
be
strategy for?
part of applicant and staff to work with adjacent business owners on strategy for the parking? That
Okay.
was like one of the.
Do we have something existing here that tacks onto, or is that another condition?
It would be another condition.
Okay.
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Oh, sure.
George Winkler again. Just want to give you on history on the Fishman lot. When that property was purchased by the city, it was an active shopping center, but we also did not have the retail that we have now. Our building wasn't a retail center then, back in those days. In other words, and then when we opened up, we actually leased parking from Jim Clifford's office across the street.
Okay.
And Sid Fishman. And then when that property was bought, it was also because there was going to be parking garages, which was never, you know, they were exploring parking garages behind, either behind Diamond Drugs or, I mean, there was
a long-term
There was a
parking,
long-term,
right.
but we
But
said we
I-
never did any of that.
Well, but I think we do have some commitment from staff that there's a strategy in play right now. There is something that
Sure,
we can get ahead of
and
this.
we spoke with that this morning with them.
Okay,
But what
good.
I'm just asking is that to be a condition that the rest of us aren't left out in the cold. These people aren't left out in the cold when this gets started, so
I see what you're
that
saying.
can get going first. In other words, that be in play, or that be in place before the city loses that parking lot, the tenant, the retail industry loses that parking lot.
I think respectfully, I don't think we can put that condition
No, we
on. I
can't.
think
We
at this
can't.
point, I think what we're saying is we've got a pretty good assurance from staff.
Yeah.
Pretty solid assurance from staff that there is a strategy emerging to offset the parking that'll be lost. And I think which gives us a comfort level that we can move forward without burdening the project with having to find that solution. Because to be perfectly blunt, this applicant is not providing that parking now. They're going to purchase this property from the city to do this project.
Okay.
Right, so.
But they're adding retail with no extra parking.
Okay. Thanks for the comment. I think I understand.
Well, we have 26.
I understand that the city, this is Kareem Morsley again, owner of Winkler Automotive Service Center. I'm a little bit shocked about the reaction here. I understand the city is going to sell this to a private party to build on. I believe the city has a responsibility to its existing retailers, because at the end of the day, you want the city to strive, you want it to thrive economically, you want pedestrian to come in, you want pedestrian to buy services and goods, but it's not just pedestrians. You can't ignore that the car is going to be around
Understood.
for another 20 years. And if we don't have that parking, and we aggravate the situation of parking by having this project going up, you're going to strangle this.
I understand. And I think
I
that's-
just want to be sure that you understand, because
I
I don't
understand
think
it.
you do.
I understand it totally, and that's why I'm turning to our economic development director
Right, and we
for
do
his
understand
assurance
that.
that strategy is in place.
We really understand that issue.
Right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. All right, what else? Anything else we need to hit on the conditions?
Well, I wanted to talk just a little bit about finishes too.
Okay.
We kind of got stayed up in big picture stuff, but I'm concerned about, 20 feet of ground face block being our pedestrian piece. We talked about the apron, but we have basically the basis building is all ground face block, right? And it has some
Brick. It's brick.
Okay, it is brick.
Yeah,
So-
we're
Because it
trying
says
to match.
CMU on the
It
plan.
says CMU on your
That's,
plan, so.
that's on the rear-facing facade and the
And the
facade
side,
that faces
yeah.
the driveway. Actually, we need to harden that facade that's specifically done along the driveway because there
Okay.
isn't a sidewalk or a curb between the drive lane and the building. So that's where we're using block there.
Mhm.
And then and it's just these piers right here along the rear that faces the garage.
everything on Diamond and the place faces the plaza is all brick, and we're getting a brick that matches the existing historic structure to help tie.
So the CMU, it turns, obviously, it goes up along your retaining wall and along the drive, right? The drive is on the other side at that point, right?
Correct.
I think that's better, thank you. But I still think there's probably some detailing you can add there. So you recess the panels, but there's got to be some color changes you can make in there, some banding and some half-inch recesses, something in there to give it a little more relief.
We received a comment from Historic that they actually wanted us to limit the materials and colors more than already.
That's fine.
Our response was that what we're trying to do is break down the scale of the building, and so we actually received quite a bit of praise on making a relatively tall building feel appropriate. So our response to that was as such. So I would be concerned about maybe there's banding or subtle color banding within the CMU. And we're already showing a recess. So I do hear your point. I don't mean to. I'm not sounding. Hopefully, I'm not sounding argumentative.
It's enormous. It doesn't show in this, but that's an enormous piece of, ground face block. So yes, they're recessed, on what is an 8-inch or 8-foot panel, but that's a great deal of CMU, even on the side elevation, which makes me feel a lot better. Couldn't quite read the difference between the brick and the. It makes me feel a lot better, but I think there's definitely, and I kind of agree, it's a lot of colors going on in this building, and your window color didn't help, but but I think there's some half inches here and there that'll really help you, like you did on the brick around the side, right? So I would encourage you to relook at it.
All right, let me ask a procedural question. We have a lot of issues in play tonight, a lot of questions coming up about various things. Some of them, to be perfectly blunt, don't really have anything to do with the applicant, but they're still relevant on the bigger term. But we're looking at a preliminary / final site plan approval tonight, combined, right? And I'm not proposing this, but what is the downside of doing a preliminary approval and asking for final approval with some of the conditions or some certain conditions resolved before we move forward to final plan? Is there a structural reason not to do that, or is there?
Let the applicant answer that.
Anybody who's got, any stakeholder in this process.
It's getting final site plan approval is a big step moving forward from a financing standpoint and releasing the rest of the design to move forward. We've been working on this for quite some time now to get to this point, and I think a lot of our efforts over the last 3 months to get the engineering down and the stormwater management, I think it would fall short if we didn't get the final site plan approved with the conditions we have and the ones we've added today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other concerns from staff on that? Go ahead.
Before, one of the questions was about pet friendly. Is it a pet friendly apartment?
Yeah, it will be.
And then I guess what ways you can.
We'll have to deal with property management on that, and the size of the animals and stuff like that. So I really haven't worked through that yet. I was worried about stormwater management last week, so I didn't get into that.
There was a question about the cables underneath on the ground, easements and things like that. Are you aware of that? Is the city aware of that?
We are aware.
There's a condition.
Yeah,
there's a condition. Okay, so that's, just want to make sure that the people who testified are aware of that. Okay.
Condition 14.
Right.
I believe we added that to what the staff
The new one,
report.
okay.
All right. 16. So 16 is going to be the parking strategy condition, correct?
Right.
All right. And we've modified 6?
6. Yeah.
So how would 16 read, I guess?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, how would 16 read?
Jasmine, you want to take a stab at that?
I wrote applicant and staff to work with adjacent business owners to come up with a parking strategy.
So how would I implement a parking strategy?
Well, one was to meet with the adjoining property.
100% agree with that.
Right.
Yeah, not a problem there.
And then the second part is to work on the parking strategy. I don't think we can require that the parking strategy be completed, but we can request that they work towards the parking strategy.
That's fine, as long as it's not something that has to be done before I get to move forward. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think it'll end up coming from the applicant's team. I think it's gonna end up coming from work that the city's already working through and developing. And it's that we want your cooperation in implementing it.
Yeah.
I don't think we're saying it's to work with the staff to establish a parking strategy, because it will probably mean some cooperation in terms of who has access to your garage versus whatever the city begins to develop, and what sort of latitude you give the adjacent owners, business owners during the course of whether it's during construction or later on.
Yeah.
So I think that's the point of the condition.
But I agree with them. Some of their concerns, you know, just where everybody parks in a quasi-urban,
Right.
suburban location. It's
But I
important
think
to work
we
in.
have to take tonight, and I know it may not be 100% satisfactory to those that testified tonight, but we have to take our Director of Economic Development's assurance that there is work underway to help solve this problem. And I know he'll be forthcoming with news when it's available. And Tom, I've seen you nod a couple of times, so I trust that because you've delivered on so many more complicated things. So I know there's something in play there, and we will work toward that together with what our own working knowledge is of a project like this, which is even with an approval tonight, we are a good many months away from losing that parking lot, maybe as much as a year. Who knows? Well,
Hope not.
I won't speak for you
There's
on your-
definitely a lot of work ahead of
But
us
there's a
to go.
staging plan that's due back for approval. There's work to be done to develop the permitting docs and all that. So there's time to work this out. I think Tom's ahead of that. So I'm comfortable with that. I think the regular meetings with the nearby stakeholders will also provide an opportunity for some of that to get kind of micro attention if there's some other issues that are in play, or if it begins to coincide with when construction starts, and who knows, maybe the strategy isn't done, but we've got some other strategy in play, whether it's.
Well, to add to the parking, you know, it's something that I've done in other jurisdictions similar to this, and it's something that I'm willing to talk to everybody here. You know, residents usually leave in the morning and come back in the afternoon, so I've, in other jurisdictions, employed some more shared parking
Cross-access, okay.
arrangements that can help ease that as part of a consideration.
Okay, very good. All right, do we have anything else to cover? You feel
I
comfortable?
couldn't
Go ahead.
find in the civil docs the undergrounding of the overheads. The utilities? What are the utilities?
What's the question?
The utilities?
The in the front?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're-
see,
They're not, you mean the overhead lines in front?
Yeah.
They're still overhead.
Still overhead. Okay.
That's, you know, those overhead lines also carry RCN communications to the county.
Yeah, they're
Right
leaving.
in front of the building there.
Yeah, they're being left as they are.
You said you were talking about relocating that pole.
No, I just gotta move the pole. It's being moved 3 feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just for pedestrian.
I thought it was much farther back.
No, it's
Okay, yeah, okay, that's not.
So I mean, the only thing that, you know, when you look at the master plan that discusses this property in the Old Town Master Plan, this is exactly the building that it envisions. This is the building we've been talking about for 20 years or whatever. I mean, this is it, right? You know, aesthetically, whatever, but this is the building that we keep talking about. The one thing that's not here that's from that master plan is the undergrounding of utilities, so that's disappointing.
That is what made the project across the street successful. They made it look, you know,
Well, across the street, they just moved the lines across the street, so the lines are, it looks like they're underground, but they just moved the lines across the street.
Right. I know it's been talked about, but there's a longer history or more work to be done on that anyway, right? Okay.
It's a public facility, I understand.
Okay. Anything else?
Yep.
All right. Quick poll. Are you ready to move forward with an
Yes.
approval, or yes? Okay. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, I'm gonna start with the last one first. Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the staff report, staff findings, applicant's testimony, staff recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant ENV 760-2018 final conservation plan approval, finding it in conformance with chapter 22.
Oh, we're backing up from the end? don't we need a site plan approval?
I'm
first?
sorry.
Did site plan approvals first.
Need a
I'm
site plan
sorry.
first.
I'm sorry. I apologize. And you saw me getting slow on my, I'm not doing this right. Okay, let me start again. It's late. Staff recommends, excuse me,
So you're making a
I
motion for
recommend
approval.
that
No.
the planning commission.
You're making a motion to approve.
Yes, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the staff report, staff findings, the applicant's testimony, staff recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant SP-7805-2017 preliminary, are we doing both preliminary and final?
Mhm.
Okay, preliminary and final site plan, finding it in conformance with section 24-170 of the city's zoning ordinance with the 16 conditions that we discussed this evening.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? So moved and seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That takes us to the waiver on the drive aisle.
Yeah, I just want to channel my inner Lenny and ask that we add, just add the actual 26 feet. Just add, it just says required dimension, aisle dimension. And since we have all the
But I'm
numbers
sorry,
here.
what are you speaking to right now?
I'm talking about the waiver.
Okay, so on the motion of the waiver, there's discussion then, so go ahead.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just want to say we just add the actual number, which is 26 feet. Correct? I just want to add the number.
Yep.
Okay, that's it. Is that good?
Yes. I think you're saying you want to add, grant a 4-foot waiver to the 26-foot
Yes,
drive
yes,
aisle
yes, the
26
driver, I
foot
just want to
drive aisle.
add 26 feet, that,
Yep.
yeah,
That
okay.
works.
All right, so I'll read this. All right. Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the staff report, staff findings, applicant's testimony, staff recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant a 4-foot waiver of the required drive aisle dimensions of 26 feet and 11.5% garage ramp, finding it in conformance with section 24-222A of the city code with no conditions.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Alrighty.
That passes unanimously, and then that takes us to our forest conservation.
Yes, okay, now, Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the staff report, staff findings, applicant testimony, staff recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant ENV-7860-2018 final forest conservation plan approval, finding it in compliance with chapter 22 of the code with the one condition, and I'll read it since I don't believe we read it, so I'll go ahead and read it. Applicant to submit revised final forest conservation plan to address minor labeling and editing errors to be approved by staff prior to issuance of any permits.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, thanks very much. Thank you. Appreciate the work on this.
Thank you.
Tom, Mr. Lonergan, real quick, just a quick side, if you don't mind.
Good ear.
No, no.
All right, that takes us to the closing of our agenda, which is going to be from the commission. Sally, may I start with you?
I just want to say that, I did not want to bring this into one of the conditions referring to this application, but since the applicant is purchasing a property from the city, it behooves the city to perhaps encourage the applicant to give a trade back and potentially ground the overhead line.
We can't discuss this in the
So.
We can't really discuss it unless we were discussing it with the applicant,
Right.
application,
Yeah,
okay?
can't discuss.
All right.
Okay, anything else?
So we can discuss public utilities and the master planning of public utilities, particularly in the Old Town master plan, which is, what we discussed way back when, the Old Town master plan. And I understand it's a public utility, but here we're opening up the sidewalk. Now's the time. It's just not going to get done if we don't do it now. So I would, love for planning staff to go to, the operational staff and see what if anything can be done to get these undergrounded now?
I know, if
And
it's
if the
a,
answer is no, we can't come up with $1 million to get it underground, then that's the answer. But we just need to
Well, the
consciously
bigger
make that
question is,
decision.
has undergrounding utilities in Old Town, which has been talked about for years, been
Yeah.
scoped at either a macro level or an incremental level? Does somebody understand that? Because if an individual applicant comes in and happens to be developing on the frontage and you say undergrounded, that may not really be practical because you gotta get out of the ground and come back down again, so it's.
no, and I totally
No,
understand
no, I'm
that.
not, I'm asking staff, actually, is there a macro plan in place for it?
It has been studied a lot. I
Yeah.
will tell you that. It has been studied a lot, but it is an extraordinarily expensive endeavor,
Okay.
and it's something that I would say we don't have the political capital to accomplish at this point.
The undergrounding along Summit Avenue many, many years ago put a very sour taste in not only the mayor and council at that time, but also the community, the retail community. Because again, it took a lot of traffic out of
Sure.
Old Town to avoid that construction area.
Okay, so there's some logistic issues, there's obviously scope and
I agree, I
cost.
think that was our point though, right? Is it-
However, we did ask that question.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
Believe
good,
me.
yeah.
No,
Thank
no
you.
specific application, but just in
Right.
general, there is a kind of a working understanding of what's feasible at this point.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Excellent. Was there anything else, Matt?
Nope.
Okay. Dan?
Yes, the Maryland Planning Commission Association has asked me to try to find a location for our October 2018 conference, and I've reached out to a hotel in our area, so I'm looking really hard to try to find that space. And I also asked the indulgence of my Planning Commission colleagues to participate if I get it here, or even if I don't. But I really am looking forward to getting it here in Gaithersburg, and I would love for you all to participate in some way. So mark your calendars for the Thursday and Friday, last Thursday and Friday of October, and hopefully it will be here.
Okay, good.
Okay, that's it for me.
I actually had the opportunity to attend, I guess last year,
Yeah,
2017.
right.
Yeah.
In, where were we, St. Michael's? No, we weren't St.
Yeah,
Michael's.
in
we were-
Talbot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it is, it does give some nice exposure to the city, to the
Yeah,
the
to the-
actual
to the
venue. It's not
location, the
just,
venue, yeah.
obviously the hotel would probably enjoy having the business, but the really interesting upside is that you get a nice visit from planning commissioners and people who care about planning from all over the state,
Right.
and they get to see, you get to show off your city.
Yes.
And we got a ton of stuff we could be proud of showing off to these
Absolutely.
folks. So.
To your point, we had just done our planning awards the night before, I believe.
Right.
And I actually took the brochure that we had, and everybody goes, "Oh wow, this is a great idea!" And some of the jurisdictions were using that as an example.
And this crowd is ripe for Frank's open meetings training.
Oh yeah,
so- Great idea.
So I'll let
you've
you
got
all
that
know.
slot
I'll let you
full.
all know.
I'll
how
do a
it-
different slot than that one. Frank's got that one.
I'll let you all know how that goes, but I'm looking forward to having it in Gaithersburg and having my colleagues there with me.
Wherever you want, Dan.
Okay.
Lloyd, anything tonight?
Yeah, I just want to relay. My wife had a very unfortunate incident occurred today on Lakelands Drive. She was driving across the causeway there between the two lakes, and there were geese that were crossing the road. And she
Very
pulled,
unusual. No. I'm kidding.
well, she pulled aside and she gave way to the geese. And this gentleman who was driving behind her decided he wasn't going to wait, and he just plowed right through the geese.
Oh my.
And she immediately called animal control, very responsive, and she got the license plate of the gentleman who happened to do this. But I just want to warn everybody, it's springtime. Animals are coming out right now as they come out of hibernation or whatever. And I think, yes, we are an urban environment, but we also have to respect the animals that live around us all the time.
They've been here longer than we have.
Yeah, they've been here longer, and
yes.
And there's some I mean, you get to know some of these animals around the neighborhood because they are frequent users in the same area. So I just want to let everybody know.
Absolutely. I mean, Great Seneca Highway gets very active this time of year and in the fall when things start to get cold with deer.
Yep.
Crossing,
Yeah.
so they become an ongoing.
Just be careful. I mean, it's a two-way street here. It's the animals and the pedestrians as well as the drivers. So be a little bit more respectful if you can, especially that particular individual.
Well,
It's
it determines the
not
planning too,
exercise.
we design these roads in the middle of natural.
Right, that's a good point.
Natural amenities with the expectation that we understand how to use them.
Yeah.
And if we don't understand how to use them, then we can't continue to plan them. So-
Good point, excellent, thank you.
Or, you know, other things.
Thanks, Lloyd. I hope that everybody's okay. I guess the geese didn't fare so well, but.
I think my wife was traumatized by it, but.
All right.
But what
Greg,
about the
anything?
geeks?
Just a reminder, the joint public hearing for the Kimco joint public for the Kimco sketch plan, excuse me, is April 16th.
Okay.
That's also the same night as the budget hearing.
Yes.
And then our next planning commission meeting is April 18th.
I anticipate, based on just sort of social media buzz, that there's going to be some confusion about what Kimco is showing that night versus what's already been approved in their way. So I just would appreciate, I know you set these things up beautifully every time, but just be very careful to note this is not what's already underway. Yeah, there's sort of two parts to this and what this means versus what the approved plan is already accomplishing in the Kimco project. Yeah. Judy?
Just wanted you to know that your forms for ethics reporting have gone out, and please promptly return them.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. John, anything tonight?
Just to reiterate that April 16th is the public hearing on Kimco, but it's also the budget public hearing. The budget public hearing will go first. And also that night is policy discussion for the saw pad sites.
Okay. So they're getting, their record closes.
It's all before or after?
Their record
I
closes.
believe it already closed. They closed
on
Tuesday. Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
April 3rd. Thanks for coming tonight, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Anything else?
Well, you mentioned the open meetings. I will say I'm actually participating as co-trainer in one for the Prince George's County MML chapter on April 12th. And then the Maryland City County managers also wanted the presentation, so I'm giving that to them on April 24th. So this actually is a busy month for open meetings training.
Great. All right. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Have a good evening. Thank you.